Owen's defense. Now, this is actually a very aggressive opening that your opponents don't know about. And you're about to learn everything there is to learn about the Owen's defense. The opening moves, the middle game plans, the traps, the tactics, everything. After watching this video, you don't have to buy any more opening courses on the Owens. In addition to that, I'm also going to be making a video on the full Owens defense theory, and you guys could find that in the membership section of YouTube. So if you're trying to win with the Owens defense, watch this full video, apply what I teach, and your ratings will go through the roof. Kicking things off in the 500 region, today I'm going to be showing you guys the Owens defense. The whole idea of this line is to give white control over the center of the board with pawns, but you control the center of the board with pieces. So knight c3 protect the pawn, and here I like to just play this move pawn to e6, move the pawn. The idea is to play bishop to b4, hit the knight, which is the main defender of this pawn. Now bishop to c4, you're not going to see the bishop going there a lot. Usually the bishop is on d3 guarding this pawn, and for some reason, whenever you play bishop b4, they always respond with bishop b2. This is just a bad pattern recognition. It's not good to respond to bishop b4 with bishop to d2 because now I'm just winning. I eliminate the knight, which is the main defender of the pawn. Then we take the pawn. 6 moves into the Owens. We're already ahead in material. Then she played pawn to f3, which means my bishop is under attack. Let's just pull the bishop back. It is exposing the king on this diagonal, but from here our plan is simple. Play a normal game with the extra pawn, trade pieces off the board, and win. So she moves the queen. I'm assuming the plan is to castle on the queen side. Not a bad plan. Let's just finish our development. King is out the center. Let's get our king out the center as well. Ooh, look at that. Bishop to b4 hits the rook. The thing is, though, my plan was to always play d6 and get my knight to d7. So she playing bishop to b4, it's kind of helping me. Knight t2 was now played. Let's go knight to d7, just finishing our development. We are ahead by a pawn, so no need to do too much. And then she played pawn to g4, getting very aggressive now. She has the right plan. The thing is, though, she didn't ask the pawn on b2 what it was doing. Because if she had done that, she would have seen the pawn was the main defender of the f3 pawn. This is called a drawback blunder, which is one of the weaknesses that I talk about in my upcoming book. It's basically finished, guys. I'm just working on the finishing things now. But now I'm hitting the rook, and I'm also hitting the pawn. The rook moves out the way to hit the bishop. Now we take another pawn, and we're now ahead by 3 whole pawns. 13 moves into the Owens, 3 pawns in the back. All right, she moves the rook out the way. The knight was pinned. Now I'm going to play this move pawn to c5. Eventually, you always want to do a pawn break. And if this trade happens, eventually I'm also going to be able to play d5. And I'm now just chasing the bishops around. And if she takes and I take, the b file will also be open. So that way I'm going to be able to put my rook there. So she took, let's take back, hit the bishop. Bishop a5 would be aggressive. Hits the queen. I'm just going to go queen to e7 and guard the pawn. Kind of was expecting that because she's always playing aggressive moves. I want to play pawn to d5 next to hit the bishop, but it's also very important that my major pieces, especially the rooks, are actively playing in the game. Okay, knight moves out the way, and the rook is on the same line as my queen, so I need to be careful. Like if I push, there's knight takes, and if I takes, there's bishop takes, and I'm not able to take back. So let's just play this move knight e5, hitting the bishop. Okay, she protected the bishop with the pawn, and there's so many things wrong with this move. First of all, you shouldn't be pushing pawns on the side that your king is on. Second of all, if I takes and you play pawn takes, your king is exposed. Third of all, you missed a fork with knight to f3. So now I'm hitting the queen and the rook. The queen now has to move out the way, and then I'm going to simply take the rook, and that's more material. So queen moves out the way. Let's just grab the rook. We're now ahead by a lot of material. The knight is guarding the bishop, by the way, so we are still safe there. Rook is still on the same line as the queen. How do I continue from here? Let's just play pawn to e5 and attack the knight. Technically, I'm not attacking the knight because if I take the knight, I lose the queen. But if she moves the knight and put the knight there, then I'm just going to trade. Oh my lord, I'm not going to trade. I think I just made a horrible mistake. Because after knight here takes, my rook is under attack and my bishop is unprotected. She found it. God, I'm in trouble now. And the funny thing is I have to take. Because once I move, I can't even move anywhere good. I think I have to take. Bishop takes, there's a check, which protects the bishop. But even if I check here, there's just bishop block. So I think I'm going to have to lose 3 points of material here, which is kind of crazy. Oh, She took on g4 instead. Just take back, hit the rook, and then the bishop is gonna be hanging. Could have got back some material there, but I'm not gonna give you that chance again. Let's go back, hit the queen, force the queen to move. There's some pawn d5 ideas to kick the bishop. I still need to get my major pieces in the game here. Okay, queen moves out the way. And all right, let's just play h6. Like, don't feel comfortable with pieces on your half because I wanted to play d5 at the bishop, but my pawn on e5 would have been weak. All right, queen goes back. Now I play d5 and apply pressure to the bishop. Still need to get these rooks in the game. Hopefully, I'm not wasting too many time. I'm trying to play c5 as well because if the pawn takes, then it really exposes the king. Bishop didn't move. She do not care. Why she doesn't care, I don't know. But let's take that free bishop. I'm assuming she's trying to sacrifice to expose my king, which is very, very aggressive. Like, let's calculate though. We think we have to calculate. Let's say I take the bishop. The queen takes. Then I play knight g4 hits the queen. The best way to refute a sack is by accepting it. If I takes, there's rook g1, but once I play king h7, there's no more checks. If I takes, there's queen takes, and then I play knight g4 hits the queen. There's no checks, and f5 is coming next, and then I'm going to be defending my king. Remember, guys, the absolute best way to refute a sacrifice is by accepting it. Now she just does not have enough pieces to carry out this attack. She was expecting this. Now we play king to h7, move the king out the way. There's no possible way in which she could check. And then rook to g1 is going to be the next move. Just start to trade more pieces off the board. This is how you defend. Queen now moves out the way. And now we're just doing fine. Let's just bring some more pieces in the game. Rook to d8 here seems fine. Let's just swing the rook over. That was a trick. She's clearly threatening checkmate here. So let's play rook to g8, hit the queen. She still has no more checks. Once the queen moves out the way, then I'm just going to take. And once I'm trading this much pieces off the board, it's going to be very smooth sailing after this. Why would you sacrifice the queen, Victoria? You should have just moved the queen out the way. I mean, this is over though. And she resigns. More Owen's defense against 600 level players. Stick around. Your opponent is now 600. More Owen's defense coming your way. Knight f3, we go bishop b7, hit the pawn. Most persons are going to play d4, but I'm also going to be explaining what happens if they just don't play d4. We're still going to be playing pawn to e6, and the plan is still to play Knight f3, we go bishop b7, hit the pawn. Most persons are going to play d4, but I'm also going to be explaining what happens if they just don't play d4. We're still going to be playing pawn to e6, and the plan is still to play bishop b4, get rid of the knight, win the pawn on e4. The whole idea of the Owens is to target the opponent's central pawns. So he did play d4. This is the position that we're going to be seeing a lot because these are just natural development move. And this is going to be a blunder that you guys are going to see a lot at your level. He basically just put the bishop on d2 to break the pin. But remember, the knight is the only defender of the pawn on e4. And when a piece only has one defender, it's a weakness. So now I'm going to give up the bishop for the knight, take on c3. It doesn't matter how he decides to take back. We take on e4 and 6 moves into the Owen's defense. We're already ahead by a pawn. So he took, we take back, and now he's attacking my bishop, which I should be able to just pull the bishop back. But for now, let's just play knight f6 since I'm developing and I'm protecting the bishop. And from here, I'm just going to finish my development. If it's a case where I'm forced to pull my bishop back, then I'll do it. But for now, my bishop is doing fine on e4. And then he plays h4, which did absolutely nothing. Maybe he's trying to just roll this pawn up the board to attack my king. But that's not how it works, bro. Let's just get the king out the center of the board. Let's see if he's going to try to start an attack with his king in the center. He moves the knight to e4. A piece is on our half of the board. We know what to do once this happens. Chase them away. So let's just hit him with d6. Assuming his plan is to play knight g4 though, but then his queen is just going to be overworked. Okay. Okay, he's guys saying offense is the best defense. I attack his knight, he attacks my bishop. But what I'm going to do is take his knight because after I take his knight, if he takes my bishop, then I take his pawn on d4, which means I'm going to be winning a pawn from this exchange. What would be interesting is if he takes on e5, so that way both of my pieces are under attack, but he didn't. So now we take on d4, and now we're just ahead by 2 pawns. Another interesting thing for him to do is just to castle the king. If he just castles the king, I'm not really able to take the bishop due to the pin. Instead, he puts the bishop on b4, which attacks the rook. But remember, Offense is the best defense. So now I'm able to play pawn to c5, defending the rook, hitting the bishop, forcing him to move the bishop again. And what do we continue to do from here? Just finish our development. Yo, guy played g4. Look at the aggression. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I think he wants to play g5 and hit the knight. I'm going to play this move queen to d6 since his king is still in the center of the board. So I'm trying to find some ways to attack his king. Pawn to e5 is not a fork, by the way. I have too many pieces covering the square, two defenders. He only has one. And if he pushes the knight, I try to check him first because trading the queen loses another pawn. And if he has to move his king out the way, then he's going to be losing the right to castle, which is what he did. He hits the knight. Let's check him on g3, forcing the king to move. And then once the king moves, then I'm just going to pull my knight back to d7. And then my plan from there is to put my knight on the e5 square where all my pieces are active. He moves the king out the way. Wait, can't I just play knight g4? It's usually best to move your pieces forward than backward. So, because knight g4 threatens knight e5, knight d7 threatens knight g5, but knight g4 threatens knight f2. And if I play knight g4 and he pulls the bishop back, the bishop no longer guards e3. So I can always play knight e3, check, then pull the queen back. So knight g4 is a very good move. Remember, whenever you're playing, guys, usually the best moves is on the opponent's half of the board. So always focus on how you can put a piece on the opponent's half of the board first. And if you can't put pieces on the opponent's half of the board, then you start looking on your half. But when you're looking on your half of the board, ensure you're checking to see how a piece could possibly cross your half of the board, which is exactly what he did, which is to check the king. The bishop no longer covers the square, so one could say it's a drawback. Knight e3 now checks the king, forces the king out the way. My queen is still under attack, but then I'm just going to pull the queen back. And once I pull my queen back, his pawn on e4 is now under attack. So king moves out the way. Let's hit the pawn. Now we have one attacker. He has no defender. Bishop g2 would add some defense. And from there, I'm thinking about just playing f6, which would open the f file for my rook, swinging this rook in the game, maybe even knight b4. So he did play bishop g2 to protect the pawn. Now I'm going to play this knight b4 move. Why am I playing knight b4? I'm trying to put more pieces on the opponent's half of the board. I'm attacking c2 twice. And even though he's guarding c2 twice, I'm attacking c2 with less valuable pieces. So it's not a case where if I take on c2, he's going to sack his queen. Okay, so he decides to take. The thing is, now once I take, here's what's happening. My knight on e3 is way stronger than the bishop, especially since the bishop has been blocked in by its own pawn, and I'm now able to put both of my rooks on the c file. In this position, his king and the c2 pawn is the main target. Now he moves the queen out of the way, which is targeting my pawn, but the queen is massively overworked here. This is one of the main weaknesses that you guys need to see. I talk about this in my book a lot. It's called overworked pieces. The queen is guarding c2, guarding the bishop. So what I'm going to do here, just play rook to c1 and target c2. And in this position, I think the game is over. I'm not seeing how he's going to defend c2, because even if he moves the pawn forward, I'm just going to take on c3 and this is winning. Okay, he pulls the bishop back to d1, which means now we're just going to be winning his queen. Rook takes c2 check. He's forced to sacrifice his queen. And the funny thing about this, after he takes with the king, because his king is exposed and his rook, okay, never mind. I thought after I takes with check, I was going to win the rook, but he's able to block with the bishop and protect the rook. But I still have something here. If you guys are able to see what I'm going to play, then that's really cool. But you should be able to see that the king is the only piece defending the bishop. In my book, I explain this as pieces only being guarded once. Or something shorter. I think I said something shorter. But that's what I was trying to explain. Rook to c8 checks the king. It's the main defender of the bishop, forcing the king out the way. And then I'm going to be able to play queen e3, which checks the king, force the king even more to move. And then once we take the bishop, it's just GG's. So the king moves out the way. We check him here. King now has to step back. Now we take the bishop for free, forcing the opponent's king to move out the way. And then once I put my rook here, there's nothing he could do to prevent checkmate on the next move. He moves his rook, but that's just a checkmate. More Owen's defense against 700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 700, blessing you guys with some more Owen's defense. On d4, we're always going to go bishop to b7, apply some pressure to this pawn on e4. All right, so now he plays bishop to d3, which is definitely an interesting way to play. Bishop to d3 is also the better way to do this, by the way. Let's just play knight f6 and immediately attack the pawn on e4 because pawn e6 doesn't really do much. And if he plays pawn to e5 to attack my knight, he could be losing the pawn on g2. So knight d2 was played, which means I'm not going to be able to play any bishop to b4 idea. So let's just continue with the plan here of playing pawn to d5. And if you guys want the full video of the Owen's defense theory, I'm going to be making a video on that. It's available for all the members of my channel. Okay, that was not bad. I was expecting him to play e5, chase the knight away, force me to play it like a French, but let's just take on d4. At least now I could say I have a very strong bishop. The knight takes. Remember, to take is a mistake, guys. So let's just play knight to d7 here. So that way, if he takes, then I'm able to take, and he's helping my development. And knight f3 was played. And I need to finish my development, but I really like this move, pawn to c5. I mean, it attacks the guy's center. What do you think about this move? Hit the center. It's very strong. If you believed what I was just saying, then you need to lock in. Because this pawn on c7 is the only piece that is holding my position together, because the queen is on the same line as the king. So if I move my pawn, knight d6, and I am checkmated. With that being said, let's just play the move pawn to e6. Finish your development. Bishop e7, get the king out the center of the board. All right, so he castled. Let's go bishop e7. Trying to get my king out the center, and then eventually I can play c5. h3 was played. Let's get our king out the center. And I want you guys to notice how I do not have any bad pieces. All my pieces are also fully developed after move 9. And eventually my plan is to connect my rooks, which is to move my queen off the back rank, so that way my rooks are seeing each other. Bro, why would you play h3 and then play h4? You're also weakening your king pushing pawns on the side that your king's on. I'm assuming he's just not sure what to do in this position. Let's just continue with pawn to c5, targeting his center. If he takes, then I'm just going to take back and just keep applying as much pressure to his center. Eventually, I'm going to be able to get my rook in the game. And by the way, don't comment on this video and tell me that you didn't know what to do, because you still had your bishop that was not developed. You still had your rooks that needed to join the game. So you making these pointless pawn moves, that's just bad. Okay, he took the pawn, not bad. Let's just take back, which means I basically need my rooks on c8 and d8. He took again. Now I'm going to take back. I have two pieces attacking h4. I'm also applying pressure to his bishop. A move like queen to d5 is going to be interesting, because then if he moves the knight out the way, he's mated. Guy's doing the Greek gift sacrifice. Sorry, bro. The Greek gift sacrifice does not work. If one, I'm able to just capture your knight if you play knight g5. And two, if a minor piece is able to defend the h7 square. So once I take, remember, the best way to refute a sacrifice is by accepting it. But now once he plays knight g5, I'm just going to take. Yes, he takes back, but now I'm just ahead by a piece, bro. Now I'm just going to move my queen out the way that you're attacking. Maybe you're able to check me on h5, but then I'm just going to move the king and you have nothing. Plus, I have a battery pointing towards g2. So you have to be careful about getting checkmated. So he plays f3, and okay, a piece is on my half of the board. Let's not allow that to be there for too long. Let's go f6, kick the bishop. I'm expecting rook to d1 to hit my queen. I'm just going to move the queen out the way, and eventually I'm going to be able to put my rooks on the open files. Oh my god, I just missed that tactic. That was bad, guys. Come on. The queen and the rook was on the same line. The queen and the rook is still on the same line. What was the tactic that I missed? Bishop to a6. Missing that the knight was covering this square, which means once he moves the queen, we take the rook and we're going to be ahead by an entire rook. He moves the queen out the way. Now we take the rook, and we're not just ahead by an entire rook. Plus, he took with the queen, bro. You needed to take with the rook. The queen is the main defender of the bishop. That's just a free bishop. Now I'm ahead by 7 points. Right, so he moves his queen to c4, and let's just finally start bringing more pieces in the game. That didn't really do anything. I want to play moves like rook to d4 to hit the queen, maybe even queen to d4. Just trade the pieces off the board, and now I'm just going to be completely winning. He texts the bro, that's a queen. He resigns. More Owens against 800 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 800. More Owens defense coming your way. D4, we go bishop b7, applying pressure to the pawn. Whenever you see knight c3, you play e6. The plan is to play bishop to b4, apply more pressure to the knight. So bishop to d3, you notice how he's trying to keep defending the pawn, but let's start targeting that knight. Now that he plays bishop to d2, we don't really want to take the knight since the pawn is not hanging. So let's just continue to apply more pressure to the pawn. Then he plays f3. So he's still ensuring that he keeps his pawn guarded. All right, not like the idea of playing knight c6, but knight c6, knight e2. Position is kind of weird. Let's just get the king out the center of the board first. All right, knight e2, he's just trying to finish his development. Guy's playing some very principled chess. Now we're going to play pawn c5. Remember the plan? We're trying to ensure that we give them control over the center with the pawns, but then eventually we're going to try to take back control. All right, so he took, let's just take back with the bishop, making it hard for him to castle. He plays bishop to g5, pinning the knight. Let's immediately put the question to that bishop. And then he pulls his bishop to maintain the pin. All right, that was not bad. Pawn to d5, there's pawn to e5. So let's just play pawn to d6 so that way he's not able to apply pressure to the knight. He moves the queen. Now we play knight to d7, which means now we're able to freely move our queen out of the way and we don't have to worry about doubling up the pawns. Whoa, pawn to g4 is very aggressive. That's a very aggressive move because he's trying to play g5, which will be opening a lot of lines pointing towards my king. Now, whenever someone is trying to attack you on the king side, it's very important that you try to counterattack in the center of the board. If you can't counterattack in the center, then you try to counter on the queen side. So before I even do anything, let's play the move knight e5 because moving the pawn to g4 left the f3 pawn unprotected. I'm also thinking about playing knight to g6 to hit this bishop, and eventually I'm also thinking about d5 to counter in the center. So he plays queen to f4. Very suspicious move, by the way. Super suspicious. Because now I'm able to hit him with this move, pawn to g5. Now it looks weird because I'm pushing pawns on the side that my king is on, which I should not do, but that's a fork. Remember what I tell you guys? Whenever there's two pieces adjacent to each other, that's what causes pawn fork. So he took, let's just take, the queen takes, and now I have two options. Pull the knight back or just move my king out of the way. Think I'm going to go with the option of moving the king out the way so that way I'm still threatening to take here with check. And if he checks me with the queen, then I just block. And he's still not going to be able to push the pawn to e5. So let's just move. Like the queen by itself is not going to be able to checkmate us, guys. So he checks, we just move, still threatening this. There's also ideas of playing queen to g4. Now he plays the move f4 because he wants to push and target here. But what was the pawn even doing on f3 in the first place? You have to think about that. It was guarding g4, which means now once I take on g4, the pawn is no longer guarding g4 and I'm attacking the queen. So it's very important that you guys know how to defend. He moves the queen to h5, which hits my knight. I'm assuming he still wants to play pawn to e5. There's this move which checks the king, but after the king moves, I'm not really sure what I have there. There's rook to g8, guards the knight. Pawn to e5 threatens mate. Pawn to f5 defends the mate. So let's go with this idea. Let's just protect the knight. So he plays, guy's playing very quickly, by the way. He's now threatening a checkmate with two pieces. Hanging his rook, by the way, but that's not a free rook. Let's play pawn to f5, defend against the mate first. And if he's trying to be slick and en passant, then I would have just took with the knight, hit the queen. I decided to put the rook on g1 anyway. So here's what I'm going to do. The rook is hanging, right? But before I take the rook, I'm going to check him on f2. Why am I checking him on f2? So that way I can confirm that he's not able to get castled. And before I take, because he wants me to take so that way his rook join the game. But I'm going to check him on e3 again. So that way I force his king to go back. That way this rook does not join the game. And then once he moves the king, that's when I take the rook. So it's kind of like come on, bro. You could have just take back if you're going to play this fast, at least play some chess, bro. You didn't even take back the piece, bro. Come on, lock in. That's not just a free pawn. The queen is not able to take because this is guarded. The king is not able to take because this is guarded. He quickly moves the king out of the way. All right, how do we win this game? How do we win this game? Let's just take this pawn so that way my queen gets some open line here. Okay, he finally decides to take, but now I'm going to take back, checking the king. And if he moves the king, I take the rook. Instead, he blocks with the bishop. Bro, you're playing too fast. Calm down. That's a free bishop, bro. The knight guards the square. Now his king has to move. He now has his queen on the same line as his king. Okay, that wins the queen, but do I have mate? Check, king up, mate. Very good. Whenever you see a good move, always look for a better one. Maybe he's forced to block with the knight, then block with the pawn, by the way, because the only square for the king is e3, and that's, oh my god. That was just a slip. Oh my god. Oh, 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 oh my god. I mean, I'm still ahead by 6 points, but Damn. Okay, he took. All right, let's just take here with check. It's crazy. Now I'm gonna have to hustle. King moves. Queen doesn't have a lot of good checks. So let's just go here. What have I done, man? Now the queen took, which means there are no checks in the position. What am I gonna do? If I go here, he checks, here he checks, here he checks, and that's just drawn. Ah, let's go here. Hit the queen. Let's just hit the queen because the knight guards. If he checks, then okay, he took the free pawn. Makes sense. I have to have as much pieces in the game as possible. So let's just hit the queen. He's able to check. Let's block the check with the knight. That's not a free pawn because the rook is guarding the pawn through the x-ray. Okay, he moves his king out the way. How does this work? Need to guard this pawn. Or maybe I could push and try to trick him, just rolling the pawn up the board. Because if how we got him. Because once he takes, the king and the queen is on the same line. Now I play rook to e8 and he's now losing the queen. That was crazy. The guy's playing very fast, by the way. This is now game. The opponent resigns. More Owen's defense against 900 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 900. More Owen's defense coming your way. Immediately developing the bishop. Let's target the pawn. Knight c3 guards it. Now I'm going to play knight f6 and apply more pressure to the pawn. And then he plays d3. So off the bat, I like the idea of playing d5, but he has three defenders. Push takes, takes. Takes is fine. Let's just play e6, then d5. So at least I could have some control over the center as well. He didn't play the whole d4 idea, which means bishop to b4 doesn't really help because I'm not going to be winning the pawn on e4. Uh-huh. Look at that. Mr. 1900 plays e5. This is one of the traps in the Owens gambit, by the way, guys. Well, not gambit, defense. You put your bishop on b7, which means you're targeting the g2 pawn. So even though they're able to take your knight, you're just going to take the pawn because you're now going to be winning the rook. I'm making a video on the full theory on the Owens defense. That's going to be available for all the members of my channel. So if you're not yet a member of the channel, please consider to be a member. It also supports the channel. So he took the knight. And okay, do we take the rook now and then after he takes, we take back, or do we just take on f6, knowing that he's just not able to defend the rook? Let's just take on f6. Nah, it's kind of scary because then there's knight e4 and there's no telling what he might have. So let's just take on h1, knowing that we have the rook. He's more than likely going to take on g7. We're just going to take back. And on the next move, I can also just get my king out the center of the board. So he moves his bishop. Assuming he's just trying to get the king out the center, I'm going to play this move queen h4 to attack his unprotected pawn. And it's also important that I don't get my bishop trapped, but f3 is no longer a possibility. Okay, now he develops the knight and attacks the queen. But I don't think I want to trade. Like, I think it's best if I just play something like, let's say queen h3, because now I have two pieces attacking the knight, which means he's forced to move the knight out the way. The knight is the main defender of h2. So after moving the knight out the way, then I'm going to be taking on h2. Unless you're getting something for giving up a bishop for a knight, don't be giving up a bishop for a knight. All right, so the knight moves out the way. Now we grab the free pawn. It's funny because I can also just roll this pawn up the board. I'm already ahead by 4 points. I'm not even thinking about castling on the king side anymore. I'm just going to develop the knight, castle on the queen side, and start roll. Okay, now that he plays queen to g4, maybe I'm going to castle on the king side because I don't want to waste too much time defending this. That was a nice move. Yeah, that was a nice move. Let's just castle. D4. Look at that. PP on the PP. My bishop is pinned. He's applying more pressure on the bishop. He's threatening to checkmate my king as we speak. But I have this very nice move, pawn to e5, which just attacks the bishop. And my bishop is not the piece which is guarding the pawn. My queen is the piece that is guarding the pawn. So if he takes on e5 thinking, bro, your bishop is pinned, I'm just going to take with the queen, which means he's more than likely has to waste more time and move his bishop out of the way. And that's going to give me time to finish my development. All right, so he just pulls the bishop back. I need to be careful here. I want to play c6 castle, d5. Rook to g1 is going to be so strong. And I'm not seeing how I'm going to be preventing the mate on g7 because I'm also not able to pull the queen back here. So let's just play h5 first to attack the queen. I'm trying to get the queen off of this file so that way it's going to be easier for me to finish my development. Okay, that move I wasn't expecting. I don't think it was good. I mean, I hit the queen, he hits my queen. I guess my queen is trapped, but I'm ahead by 4 points, bro. You think I'm not gonna trade the queens? I take the queen, he takes my queen. I can actually sacrifice on f2, then take the queen, but I think it's just fine if I take. And then after knight takes, I go here to protect the pawn. Obviously, if he takes, I'm happy because we're trading pieces off the board. But being ahead in material by 4 points, I'm just chilling here. Let's just take back. Bishop d5 hits the rook and the pawn. But pawn c6 hits the bishop, and then after the bishop takes, I play pawn d5. Remember, the two pieces are adjacent to each other on the same color, which means I'm now threatening some forks. By the way, guys, if you haven't liked the video as yet, consider hitting that like button. I'm trying to get at least 1,000 likes this video. So bishop to g5 was played. He's just not trying to get forked. Let's just complete our development. He castles the king. Now we play f6, not allowing any piece to be on our half of the board. He pulls the bishop back. And how do we convert this game into a win? I'm going to play f5 now, trying to play e4, rolling the pawns up the board, maybe trying to win the pawn on f2. Hey, rook is on the same line as my king. I need to be a bit careful. There's this bishop to h6 move that I need to watch out for. Like if I push bishop h6, there's rook up, bishop h5. Maybe I don't want to allow all of that, to be very honest. Yeah, let's just play knight to f6. So that way if he... Oh, I was actually about to say I'm able to play rook a7, but I can't. So if he plays bishop to h6, I have to play rook f7, which is fine. Okay, he plays the move. Now we go here. We have to defend the bishop, by the way, because he has two attackers. Now we have two defenders. There's no way for him to add additional attackers to my bishop. And if he's trying to trade all the queens off the board, that's going to be better for us because we're the one who's ahead in material. Okay, he's trying to get the king in the game. And now I'm just going to continue with the plan of rolling the pawn up the board. After takes, the bishop move, now I'm able to swing this rook in the game with tempo. So he moves the bishop, rook comes in the game with tempo. And then once he moves his king away, now I'm able to get out of the pin. Because you don't want to be pinned for too long. Now if he takes, I takes, and we're just trading. I'm assuming he doesn't want to trade, but okay, it's still going to be a very easy position for me. That was not a bad move. He's attacking my rook. So if I take his bishop, he takes my rook. So I have to move my rook out the way. Again, if he trades, it's still good for me. He attacks the rook again, but no, I'm going to take because two rooks, well, not two rooks, but two bishops are better than a rook. So once I takes and he takes, then I'm going to take here. Now we're ahead by 4 points. And I'm now just ahead by what? A piece and a pawn? Okay, he's getting his king in the game, but the rook and the pawn is now on the same line, bro. Check. Once the king move, which king has to go back, by the way, and then I'm going to take this pawn on c2. Now we take, threatening this pawn. I'm threatening to go here, grab the rook, trade all the pieces off the board. This is just winning. Here he moves the king. Now I'm going to play this move pawn to e3 because the rook is on the same line as the king. That's a free pawn, by the way. But the pawn is pinned and the plan is to take on f2. And this could even lead to mate. Okay? Guy moves the king, which means that's... Wait, what? Oh, whoopsies. That is not a checkmate. How embarrassing. All right, that's a free pawn. That's a check. King has to move. Still not a checkmate. But guess what? That's just a checkmate. More Owen's defense against 1,000 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,000. Still playing some more Owen's defense. Pawn d4, we go bishop to b7. Knight c3 guards the pawn. We play e6. Why e6? We're trying to eliminate that knight, which is the main defender of the pawn. Everybody's going to play knight f3. We hit the knight, and then he plays bishop b2. 1,000, by the way. And now we're already winning a pawn. Because what we're going to do here is eliminate this knight. A lot of persons are going to play like this. The knight is the main defender of the pawn. So once he takes, we simply take on e4. And just like that, we're already ahead by a pawn. 6 moves into the Owen's defense. Okay, he develops his bishop to hit my bishop. Remember to take is a mistake though, guys. Don't take and allow him to help his queen. Just play knight to f6 and defend your bishop. So that way, if he takes, then you take, and his bishop is now under attack. Plus, we're already ahead by a pawn, which means we're also trying to trade pieces off the board. Hey, if you could get this position every game, it's very simple. You develop your pieces, you win the pawn, and then you trade the pieces off the board, and then you win the easy endgame. Okay, now he puts his rook here, which means my bishop is under attack twice. Still don't want to take his bishop, so let's just pull the bishop back to b7. I feel more comfortable with my bishop controlling this very long diagonal. Still need to finish my development though. So my plan from here is to play pawn d6, knight d7, not knight c6. Because if I play knight c6, then I'm just blocking my bishop on b7. All right, so he pulls his bishop back. Maybe he wants to play c5. Let's continue with the plan. Just trying to finish my development. He's pinning my knight. Let's just play knight d7 though, just to support the knight. And eventually I'm going to be able to play c5, take on d4. My rook is going to get the file. And this is just a very nice position for black. I'm ahead by the pawn. I have no weaknesses in my position. So white is just hopeless here. A4 is not a bad plan because he wants to play A5, and that's why I'm going to play A6. So that way, if he decides to play A5, I play B5, but then he plays B4, which means I'm just going to play C5 here. Same idea. And keep in mind, guys, we are doing pawn breaks, and pawn breaks and understanding pawns will help you so much in terms of planning in chess. The whole idea of me doing these pawn breaks is so that way I'm able to open the lines for my major pieces. Okay, rook to b1 is a nice move, attacking my unprotected bishop. But let's just play queen to c7. Like, I'm defending my bishop, but I'm doing it productively, because I'm still trying to connect my rooks. And guess what? We're on the 15th move. And remember what I always tell you guys, don't make move 15 catch you with more pieces on the back rank apart from your rook and your king. Right, so he took on c5. And okay, taking with the knight is kind of weird because if I take with the knight, this is what overworked pieces looks like. By the way, guys, if I take with the knight, this is left not unprotected, but then he's able to destroy my king. If I take with the queen, then he's able to take here, which means I may have to take with the pawn, which it's not really something I wanted to do, but at least I'm able to play c4 in some lines to chase away the bishop. And I'm also trying to ensure that my rooks are doing anything because connecting the rooks is not the only thing that you want to do. You want to connect the rooks, but you also want to put your rooks on open lines. Right, so he still decided to give up the bishop for the knight. Anyways, let's take with the knight, not the pawn, and double up our pawns. And then he jumps in with his knight, which means now I'm not able to play c4 because he's covering the square a good amount of time. And I'm just going to use the time to bring more pieces in the game. Just put the rook on the same line as the queen, expecting him to move the queen out the way here. He did move the queen out the way. And now I'm going to hit him with this move, knight to d5. Why knight d5? Not only am I threatening to play knight f4, which would fork the queen and the bishop here, I'm also threatening to play knight c3, which would fork the queen and the rook here. Ooh, queen f3. Guy's putting his queen on the same line as my bishop. But the thing is, if I move my knight, his rook is also going to be able to take here. He's attacking f7 twice, but it's already guarded twice. So I like the idea of just playing knight b4. It cuts off the communication between the queen and my bishop, which means I'm still attacking his queen, and my knight is also attacking the bishop. So once his queen moves out the way, I could simply take the bishop. I mean, I'm still ahead by a pawn, so the goal is to trade. Okay, that's a nice move. Bishop e4. Notice how the knight is left unprotected, but I can't take because if I take the knight, bishop to h7 wins the game. And okay, let's just take on e4 here. Let's just take. He took with the queen. That is still being guarded. I would love to win this pawn, but it is being guarded by the queen. So I'm going to attempt a removing the guard tactic. Oh my god, I almost played rook to d4. But this is why you guys need to keep the drawback principle in mind. Because if I had played rook to d4, then I would have hung my rook and I would have lost the game. So let's just first find somewhere for the rook, protecting the pawn. There was also a rook to b8, putting it on the file. But I'm suspecting he's going to play c3, chase my knight away, put the knight on c6. Okay, maybe I could have played knight d5. Ooh, the attack is coming. I have to be careful, by the way, guys. This guy's trying to attack me. But now I'm able to play rook to d4, hit the queen. We have to be careful about pawn c3. Whenever there's two pieces adjacent to each other on the same color, this is how I explain it in my book, then you have to be looking out for pawn forks. So he moves the queen out the way. Now the queen is no longer guarding this pawn. Then I'm going to be able to take the pawn. It's still very tricky though, because if I take the pawn here, there's actually this move, rook to b7, that could catch me by surprise. I have to be careful. And then if I move the queen, then he takes here. So let's see what is really happening here. I think I'm going to hit him with f6 first, chase away the knight, and then I consider if I want to take here. Okay, there's still pawn to c3. I just told you guys about looking out for pawn c3, and I allowed pawn c3. If pawn c3, though, I'm assuming I could just move the rook because if he takes my knight, I take his knight. But I'm also thinking about just taking, and then if he takes, I take, hit the rook with some ideas of playing queen c1. Who knows? Okay, he moves the knight out the way, didn't play c3. Now, f6 could be a target. And if I take this pawn, then he's just going to take this pawn. And I'm not necessarily trying to get that position. So let's just go rook to d6 and guard the pawn. This guy's playing some chess, by the way. Like, even though I'm ahead by the pawn, he's making it a bit harder for me to trade the pieces off the board. And all his pieces are also active. Okay, then he eventually plays pawn c3 to kick the knight. Knight c2 hits the rook, but I prefer knight d5 because I still hit the rook, I keep the knight in the center, and I keep some attack on his c3 pawn. He pulls the rook all the way back to the back rank. All right, now I'm going to play this move, e5, so that way my pawn on e6 is no longer as weak. My rook is only being guarded by, well, my rook is the only piece guarding the knight. I'm expecting rook to d1 to apply more pressure to the knight. I'm just going to play rook to d8 to apply more defense. He pulls the knight back to e3, but that means his pawn on e3 is no longer being guarded by the queen. So that is an example of a drawback mistake as well. Oh my god, again, if I takes it, there's rook to b2, guys. I have to be careful here. So let's just play rook to d8. If he takes, I take. There's one thing I have in mind. If he takes, he's able to play c4, try to chase away my rook and play rook b7, but I'm just going to play rook to d7. It's like one thing I'm noticing, it's like a trend. Whenever someone gets a good position like this, especially in a 10-minute game, they usually just don't have any time on the clock. So, I mean, maybe that's a sign that they're able to play good chess, but they can't do it quickly, which is not a flex. I mean, you don't necessarily have to know how to play speed chess as yet. Focus on playing good chess first. He plays h3. Now I'm going to play knight f4, just putting my knight on his half of the board, opening the file for my rook. There's no more rook to b7 because I'm guarding the square twice, and I would like to play moves like rook to d3 and attack the queen. Okay, he puts his rook on d1. Very nice move, by the way. All right. Takes, rook takes, queen takes. Okay, let's just think this is gonna go into an endgame. I can also just play knight to d3. Knight d3 is a nice move because my knight is just fully guarded on the d3 square. If he takes, I takes. Rook to b7, I take the queen, so I'm fine. He also only has a minute on the clock, and whenever your opponent has low time, you don't want to simplify the position. You want to keep the position complex, so that way they have to continue thinking to find the best moves. And whenever someone is low on time, you should not play fast with them because that's going to get you to blunder. This is where you slow down, try to find good moves. So, because the better moves you play, the more they're going to have to think about their moves. Okay, he hits my rook, which is the main defenders of my knight, so I have to be very careful here. Let's just play rook to d6, hit the knight. He guards the knight. And now it should be easier for me to just bring him in an endgame. Like, after takes, he's not going to be able to win this game with 30 seconds on the clock. But for someone who is 1,000, he's playing some chess. But if you look on the guy's flag, he's from Jamaica. All right, let's just take back here. All right, he's clearly trying to double up on my knight. So let me just ensure that my knight is fully guarded. Let's protect the pawn. He doubles up on the pawn. Then I play e4. Now my knight is extremely guarded. If he plays pawn to f3, then I play pawn to e3. He's attacking this pawn. Now I'm just going to guard it. And yeah, chess is not fair, bro. Because, okay, you played a good game, but you have no time on the clock. Now I'm just protecting my pawn. He only has 4 seconds on the clock. Now he's playing fast. Now he's playing good moves. But yeah, you're gonna lose on time, bro. And he lost. More Owen's defense against 1,100 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,100. More Owen's defense coming your way. Before we go bishop to b7, applying pressure to e4. And then after knight c3, remember to play e6. The whole idea is to put your bishop on b4, eliminate the knight, which is the main defender of the pawn on e4. Right. And that's why we're seeing moves like bishop to d3. He's basically trying to overprotect the pawn. I like to play knight to f6 in this position and attack e4 because some persons actually play e5, hit the knight, and then blunder the pawn on b2, especially the lower level players. And by the way, guys, now that he plays knight to f3, it's transposed all into the line that we're all used to. But if you want to know how to play this line even deeper, I made a video explaining the entire theory on the Owen's defense. So, okay, he plays a3. Now we should know what to do here. We have two pieces attacking the pawn. He has two pieces guarding the pawn. So what we're going to do is eliminate the knight, one of the main defenders of the pawn. And then once he takes back, we simply take on e4. And just like that, 7 moves into the Owen's defense. We're already ahead by a pawn. All right, so he develops the bishop, which is guarding the pawn on c3. Let's just use the time to get our king out the center of the board. He also castled his king, and now I'm going to play this move d6. d5 was also fine, by the way, but I like to play moves like knight d7 and f5 in these types of setups, especially now that he's attacking my knight twice. I'm going to play f5, defending the pawn twice, and I'm trying to play moves like knight d7, rook f6, rook h6, or rook g6, and that's how I'm going to start an attack on his king. All right, so he moves the queen. My knight is still safe though, so let's just finish with our development here. The pawn on e6 is unprotected, but there's nothing attacking the pawn just yet. And once I manage to play rook to f6 safely, then I should be fine. Once I play rook f6, my rook and my queen will be on the same diagonal, so I have to be on the lookout for some bishop to g5 tricks. Okay, c4 doesn't do much. Knight f6 is an idea, queen f6 is an idea, rook f6, but what if he takes first? And then I'm going to take and hit the knight. Maybe I should not rush that. But it's fine. I don't think it works. Like, after takes, hit the knight, bishop to g5, I take it the queen and I'm just winning. If he takes hit my queen and I take back, I'm going to be losing a rook, but I'm going to be gaining a knight and a bishop, which is always better. Okay, he plays knight g5, which means if I take and then he plays bishop takes, I'm going to be losing material. So rook to g6, if he takes, I takes, that's winning material. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take on d2. And then, okay, now my pawn on e6 is a bit weak. Once he plays queen takes, I'm going to have one defender. He's going to have two attackers, but I'm still going to play rook to g6. Because once I play rook to g6, I'm still applying pressure to the knight twice. If he moves the knight out the way, he's losing the pawn on g2. And once he loses that pawn on g2, it's only checkmate that could follow. Oh, he still decided to take on e6. Look at that. Now we take on g2 with check. Now my queen is under attack, so I'm going to have to save my queen. But let's just play the move queen to h4. I'm applying some pressure to f2, which is being guarded by his queen. But I'm also threatening to take this pawn. And if I manage to put my bishop on f3, his king will also have no squares to escape. Guy played rook to e2. Where's the king going to escape now? Wait, can we checkmate this guy? There's actually a checkmate here, guys. And if you guys are able to spot this, then the potential is there. Remember what we spoke about? Look for moves on the opponent's half of the board. Look for the most forcing moves and always calculate your checks first. The move rook to g1 is a brilliant move because the king has to take. The bishop covers the dark square, so we check here. King can't go here. King has to go here. We check. King has to move, and that's just a checkmate. So let's check on g1. Very nice move. King has to take, now we check here. The king is not able to move. The king has to go here, now we check here. And then once he moves the king to e1, that's just a checkmate. More Owen's defense against 1200 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1200. More aggressive Owen's defense coming your way. He develops the knight. Let's just target the pawn. He develops the knight to guard the pawn. Now we play e6. Why? The plan is to put the bishop on b4, get rid of this knight, and then win the pawn on e4. Very simple idea, which is why he played a3, because now my bishop is not able to go to b4. All right, whenever they do this, we should be able to just immediately start attacking in the center with moves like d5, because the whole idea of bishop a3 doesn't work anymore. He is able to play pawn to e5 and said, hey, I got some space, but then we're able to play pawn c5, and we're also going to be playing it like a good French defense. But he took the pawn, so let's just take back, and it's just going to be a normal game, to be honest. Like, I'm going to develop, he's going to develop, we're both going to develop, and it's going to be a normal game. So he plays d4. Let me just develop my bishop to d6. I'm not sure if I want to put the knight on f6 or e7 just yet, but I'm assuming he's also going to develop his bishop to d3. So he develops his bishop. So I'm just going to play knight to f6. I'm assuming he's going to castle. I'm going to castle. If he allows me to play h6, I may play h6 to prevent bishop g5. If not, and he still decides to play bishop g5, I'm just going to play h6 and then chase it away. So he castle. I'm going to castle. The move I'm expecting here is bishop to g5. Instead, he plays rook to e1. Knight to e5 could be annoying. So I'm actually going to play pawn to c5 and start attacking his center as quickly as possible. I'm not too afraid of bishop g5. If he doesn't play, then I'll be happy. But it's not something that I'm afraid of because I'm always able to play h6. All right, so he did play bishop g5, not a bad move. First I'm gonna play h6, just getting rid of that bishop out of my half of the board. He pulls the bishop back. I want to play knight c6, but I don't want to block my bishop. So let's go knight d7 to support the knight. So that way, eventually, I can play queen c7. Wouldn't want to play queen c7 and allow knight b5 though. So it's still slightly tricky. Right. I mean, the guy still decided to play knight b5. Anyways, now here's how I like to deal with moves like these guys. So he's hitting the bishop. I'm clearly going to move the bishop out the way. But then after moving the bishop out the way, I am going to eventually chase away the knight. So, yeah, still have to be careful. I'm wondering if I should go here. I don't want to go here. Then he's able to go here. And if a6, he goes here, but then I go here. And, okay, if I go here and then he goes here, maybe the knight could go here as well. But knight to e4 should be a nice idea. Because anytime he goes here, I just hit the knight. So let me just pull back to e7, not losing the bishop. Eventually, the plan is to play a6 and then put the bishop back on d6. But I chose b8 would have also been a good move. I chose e7 instead of b8 because this pin is also a bit annoying. So at least once I put my bishop on e7, I'm no longer being pinned. Okay, that's a move I was expecting. It's very important that we look on the opponent's last move. He has two pieces attacking my bishop. I only has one. But once I play rook to e8, not only am I protecting my bishop, I'm also putting my rook on the same line as his queen. So he needs to be careful here. Whoa, he gave up the bishop for the knight. I think he's expecting me to take with the bishop and then he trades, but I'm just going to take with the knight, bro. Like, you still have to deal with the fact that this is happening. I'm also thinking about playing pawn c4. In some cases, that bishop could even be getting trapped, but he is able to put his bishop on the f5 square. Okay, he moves the queen to d2. He knows the dangers that was coming, but this is where we start to neutralize pieces on our half of the board. I mean, maybe I should hit him with knight e4 first, because if I go a6, that's one additional defender on e4. So if I hit him with knight e4, it hits the queen. If he takes, he's giving up the bishop for the knight. My bishop guards the pawn, and once the knight moved, then I could play a6, and his pawn on d4 could even be hanging. So the plan is to play a6 and neutralize the knight. Remember, that's called the principle of neutralization. But let's hit him with knight e4 first. Move queen, but did you see where the guy put the queen? He puts the queen on the same line as my rook still. Maybe he thinks because my bishop and the knight is in the way, it's not going to be affecting him. But that's fine. Let's continue to follow principles first. Let's hit him with a6, neutralizing that knight. I'm assuming he's going to pull the knight back to c3, and then I'm going to start setting up some stuff for him. Okay, he pulls the knight back. Now, the first thing that came to my mind here, because there's a lot of attack on my pawn, is okay, let's count. One, two, three, four attackers. One, two, technically three defenders. So if he plays queen takes, he loses the game. If he plays knight takes, I'm wondering if I'm able to get away with bishop f6 and apply pressure to the knight. Because if he takes, I takes, and he's losing the knight, that's an idea. Okay, I mean, he's also able to take with the bishop, but it's not a bad move. Pawn c4 doesn't help. Immediate bishop to f6 is also an idea, but I don't want him to take on e4 winning material. So let's take on d4 first. I'm also eliminating the only pawn that he has in the center of the board, which means I now have full control over the center. I'm not expecting queen takes. Maybe he's going to play queen takes because he's afraid of the fact that the queen is on the same line as my rook. Who knows? All right, so he took with the knight, was expecting that. I like the idea of bishop f6, but pawn f3 is very strong. Because then the moment I move my knight, let's say I take, he takes, I takes, rook takes, I takes, then he takes. I don't really get anything. So I still have to ensure that I'm on the lookout for f3. So there's bishop c5. If he plays b4, the knight is left unprotected. So I'm going to go with bishop c5 instead of bishop f6. Now, my bishop is on the same line as his queen and his king, and my rook is on the same line as his queen. Remember, this type of weakness that you guys need to be able to spot, I call it in the book, pieces on the same line. See, he took on e4 with the bishop. The guy has like 48 seconds on the clock, by the way. I mean, he's playing some good moves. I know of two pieces attacking his knight, but like you guys need to understand that time is also a factor. Like you shouldn't feel proud if you lose on time. Because now the game is just over. No, I can sack my queen and still win the game because you have no time on the clock, bro. Now I'm going to hit him with this move, queen f6, applying some pressure to the pin knight, and eventually my plan is to play rook to d8. So he's playing good moves, but he's thinking too long in order to play these good moves. So maybe he's someone who prefers to play 30-minute games or 15-10. It doesn't mean that you should try to play chess faster. It just means that you should try to work on your pattern recognition so that way you're able to see better moves faster. Like I've seen a lot of persons who they have time pressure issues and they think playing more blitz games is going to help them. That's not what you should do. You should just do puzzle rush and continue to train because I mean, guy played a good game, but guy just has no time on the clock and he's actually not trying to come on, bro. Finally just move the knight. Okay, let me just sack the bishop. I mean, it's winning a pawn though. Taking the pawn, king has to take the knight, we win the game. But the guy has no time on the clock. With that being said, more Owen's defense against 1,300 players. Stick around. Your opponent is now 1,300. We're playing some more Owen's defense. He plays knight f3. Let's start targeting that pawn. Knight c3 guards the pawn. Now the goal is to eliminate that knight, setting up a removing the guard tactic. After d4, bishop to b4. This is going to be the position that you guys see mostly because naturally people are just going to develop their knight and move the pawns in the center. Now because he knows that I'm trying to get rid of the knight, he adds more defense to the pawn. But now I'm going to play this move knight e4, which is adding more attackers to the pawn. Now I have two attackers and technically he only has one defender since the knight is pinned. Pawn to e5 hits the knight. We're not going to pull back the knight. We're jumping into the e4 square. Even though it looks as if we only have one defender, remember that this knight is pinned. If he takes on e4 and give up the bishop for a knight, that's good for us. Most people usually play bishop to d2 here, but we still get the bishop here. So that is still good for us. He blocks the bishop. Now we take. We already have the bishop here. And there's something that I want to talk to you guys about here. I mean, I don't think he's going to take with the knight. He took with the queen, which means the queen no longer guards the knight. Remember, guys, do not give up your bishops for knights. Where am I going to take on f3? I'm going to be giving up my bishop for a knight because now I'm able to see what I'm gaining. Not only do I get the chance to double up his pawns, I'm also get the chance to put my queen on this very active squares, which attack his pawn on d4. And in some cases, I can also put my bishop on g5. For example, if he castles his king and then I'm just pinning him. Now he has to find some clever ways to not lose this pawn. So he plays a3. A lot of persons are going to play a3 because they want you to take, and then after they take back, their pawn is guarded. But I like to just pull the bishop back, give them the problem to solve. And knight to b5 is kind of a problematic move. But instead, he castles tactics alert. Tactics alert. My Nigerian friend, 1,300 by the way, puts his queen and his king on the same diagonal. What are we going to hit him with? Bishop to g5. 11 moves into the Owens, and we're already winning the queen. Because even if he plays f4, we're going to take on the queen is lost. If he takes on g5, we take GG. And the opponent resigns. More Owens defense against 1,400 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,400. More Owens defense coming your way. D4, we simply hit the pawn, and our whole idea revolves around that pawn on e4. So they're going to defend, we're going to attack. Bishop to d3, that's usually one of the best way to defend the pawn because they didn't really develop the knight on c3. But we're still going to play the move pawn to e6 here because once the knight goes to the c3 square, we always want to go bishop to b4 and pin that knight. Knight f3, he's just developing his pieces normally. Let's play knight to f6 here, still attacking the pawn on e4 because, I mean, moving the pawn to e5 is a move, but once he moves the pawn, my plan is to just take. Now, whenever you see them play this bishop g5 move, it is a sign that they have to give up the bishop for the knight. So we're just going to play the move pawn h6 and chase away the bishop because if he goes back and we play g5, we're already winning the pawn, which means he has to take. We're going to take with the queen, and from here, it's just chess, and we're going to have the bishop here. So he gave up the bishop. I mean, pawn takes is interesting, but let's not double up our pawns. Okay, he's still trying to complete his development. And now I'm going to play this move, pawn to c5, very thematic. You can also play d5 followed by c5. I'm just choosing not to play d5 because I know if I play d5, he's going to play e5 and attack my queen. I'm expecting something like c3 here because if he takes, he's basically helping me to develop my bishop. So he did play e5. And here I don't really have a lot of options. I mean, queen to f4, there's already pawn to g3, which traps the queen. Maybe not lose the queen, but it's weird. So it's either queen to e7 or pull the queen all the way back to d8. I'm going to pull the queen all the way back to d8 because I'm also trying not to block my bishop in. And okay, from here, we're just going to play some chess. Maybe he's going to play pawn c3. I may play knight c6. Okay, he castled the king. That's kind of weird though, because once I take on d4, he didn't play pawn c3, which means his pawn on e5 will be a weakness. I'm assuming he's going to take back with the pawn. And queen to g5 immediately threatens checkmate and attack the pawn. But okay, knight to f3 easily defends against that. There's this bishop to c5 move that I like. Let's just develop the bishop, hit the knight. And by the way, this is also a plan that you guys could use in the Sicilian defense, where you develop the bishop to c5, which attacks the knight. And then once the knight moves out the way to attack your bishop, you just pull the bishop back to e7. And in a lot of cases, the knight could be misplaced on b3. So he did pull the knight back. Now we're just going to pull the bishop back. I'm thinking about playing d6 eventually. Don't really want to play d5 because I have a really strong light squared bishop. I'm thinking about also playing knight to c6, but that will block my bishop. So it's kind of weird. One thing I'm sure I'm going to do though is to castle my king. And if you look on this guy's position, all he needs to play is queen e2. His king and his two rooks will be the only pieces on the back rank. And usually if your king and the two rooks are the only pieces left on the back rank, it's a sign that you've done something correct in the opening. Knight e4 is also a very nice move. He's really trying to apply a lot of pressure to my dark squares. All right, let's just develop the knight. First and foremost, attacking the unprotected pawn, because once I castle queen g4, it could give him hope to attack my king. I'm going to castle, but not just yet. If he plays knight d6, I'm just going to take. Okay, he plays a3. Whoa, what a blunder, bro. He plays a3 to prevent my knight from going to b4, but he didn't check to see that I was attacking the pawn on e5. Yeah, this is just overexerted. No, before I take this pawn, I need to ensure that I'm looking out for what my weaknesses are. Remember, guys, it's very important that you know what your weaknesses are and the opponent's weakness. So once I take the knight and the pawn is now unprotected, not seeing any way to attack the knight, not seeing any way to attack the pawn, which means we take on e5, and just like that, 13 moves into the Owen's defense, and we are already a pawn up. Okay, so he uses the rook to protect the knight because he couldn't really move the bishop because I was just going to take. Definitely going to use this time to get my king out the center of the board. F5 is an idea, D5 is an idea. There's also a rook to c8 to get my rook in the game because remember, after all the minor pieces are developed, you now want to ensure that your major pieces are also doing something. All right, so pulling back the knight is also a mistake. It's not a huge mistake. It's in fact a drawback mistake and it's not about what the knight was no longer doing. In this case, it's what the queen is no longer doing. Because, okay, I mean, I could have to get the bishop here and everything. But this time, not only do I get the bishop here, but I'm also weakening his pawn on d3, which means now he has an additional weakness, which means it's going to be way easier for me to attack him. And because I know that he's weak on this diagonal and he has no light squared bishop, f5 is how I'm going to continue my attack. Moving his knight, forcing the knight out the center of the board, so that way my light squared bishop is very strong. And now I can also decide how I want to get my dark squared bishop in the game. I can always go bishop f6, put it on this diagonal, bishop d6, put it on this diagonal. There's a lot of options that I have, but I also don't want to rush this position. There's knight c4, which I'm expecting to come eventually. Let's just use the time to get all the pieces in the game. Remember, it's not the best if you want to immediately start the attack, but you do not have all your pieces in the game. Now I like the idea of bishop to d6 because if he plays knight to b5 and attack my bishop, I can always just pull the bishop back to b8 and the bishop is going to be very strong on this diagonal. Another very nice move or idea that I like is rook f6 followed by rook g6, targeting the focal points. Now, it's also very important that you guys understand the meaning or the concept of focal points. Let's go rook to f6. This is called a rook lift, but focal point is something that I discussed heavily in my book, which is almost finished. But, well, the book is finished. I'm working on the page and the cover and the website and all of that stuff. But after queen to h5, okay, he's basically preventing rook to g6, which it definitely makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking about if there's any way in which I could force his queen away and I'm not seeing it. I like the idea of just playing queen to e8. Oh, king h7 is nice. King h7 has to be nice because I'm not afraid of the queen. The queen by itself is not going to checkmate me. And the plan is just to play rook to g6, continue the attack on the opponent's king, get him to push pawns on the side that his king is on. But right now, the main focal point that I want to attack is g2 because it's only being guarded by the king. and it's easy for my pieces to attack that pawn. Maybe eventually he's going to play g3, and then the light squares around this king becomes the new focal point. So knight to f6 was played. Definitely a weird move. I mean, maybe he wants to play knight g5. So I'm just thinking about playing rook to g6, which is just a nice idea. It's very important that we're looking out for the possible checks that the opponent has. Right now, he only has one check that doesn't really work. I also noticed that his queen is on my half of the board. And if the opponent has a piece on your half of the board, it's very important that you try to neutralize it. He plays knight e5 to attack my rook. It's a huge mistake, by the way, because, and again, all the mistakes that my opponent is making are drawback mistakes. So even though it's not about what was the knight doing, it's something about the knight. Moving the knight away, it allows my bishop to have a more open diagonal. Now I have two pieces attacking this weak focal point. We take the pawn on g2 with check, forcing the opponent to move. And now we're just ahead by two clean pawns. He still has no attack on my king. He moves his king out the way. There's now two pieces on my half of the board, so I'm heavily thinking about neutralizing. Bishop to c5 I really like because it targets this focal point. There's also bishop to g5. Pawn to d6 hits the knight. Let's say I hit the knight. Okay, if I hit the knight, maybe he's going to put the knight here. Right, I think I have an idea here. I'm going to go bishop to c5, targeting the f2 focal point because it's only being guarded by the king. Remember, guys, any square that is only being guarded by the king, those are the squares that you want to attack. That's how you become better at attacking in chess. There's two things I'm thinking about here. Just queen g5, trade the queens off the board, simplify the position, or rook g5, chase the queen away, and then once the queen move, I can go bishop to g2 and check the king. Which is why he played rook to e2, guarding the pawn. Now he has two defenders. I have two attackers. Um, Pulling back the rook hits the queen. More than likely, ooh, tactics alert is coming up. Tactics alert is coming up because once I hit him with queen to g5, I think the only safe square for the queen is f7, which is, it just looks weird. I don't think anybody would want to put their queen on f7, but I think it's the actual move to play. Putting the queen on h4 immediately loses the game. Okay, he found it. He puts the queen on f7. All right, so we have a forcing move here, which is bishop to g2 check, forces the opponent's king to move. Pawn to d6 attacks the knight, and I'm trying to see if I'm able to trap his queen, like pawn to d6 followed by rook to c7, and his queen is just not going to have squares to move to. But the moment I play e6, my pawn on e6 is left unprotected, so it's still very weird. All right, let's go with bishop to g2 check. I like this move because if I have to play d6, I don't want my bishop to be hanging. He has to play this move, king to e1. How do I continue here? All right, so he moves the king out of the way. My pawn on d7 is under attack twice. Pawn to d6 attacks the opponent's knight. If queen takes, I take the knight. Pawn to d6 hits the knight. Where's the knight headed? Think the only square for the knight is the c4 square. The issue is my pawn on e6 becomes too soft. But at that point, okay, I can't even do this because he's just going to take. It's a bit tricky. I don't want to weaken my pawn. And I want you guys to notice how I'm thinking. Before I make a move, I'm thinking about what I'm going to be weakening. And that's how I don't fall for a lot of drawback mistakes. So the idea that I'm going to use is I'm going to first play rook to c7. So I'm defending the pawn on d7. I'm putting my rook on the same line as the opponent's queen. And okay, he immediately played h4, which is a move that I was not expecting, but I guess he didn't see that this is under attack. So my rook is under attack. What I'm about to do now is called danger levels. Could be a tactic alert as well, but it's kind of tricky because once I play this move d6, the queen is going to take, and then the moment the queen takes, my rook is going to be under attack. So if I take his knight, he's going to take my rook. It's kind of weird now. Didn't see this h5 move. And the issue is I have no safe squares for my rook. Hmm. Okay, I think I have to play d6 here and hit the queen. And once he plays queen to e7, I'm wondering if I'm able to play something like rook e7. It doesn't work. The queen is just going to escape and my rook is still going to be trapped. Oh, maybe he thought his queen was trapped. Come on, bro. Lock in. That's a queen. Pawn to g6 check. I mean, yo, that's actually not bad, bro. Pawn to g6. Okay, I'm just going to pull back. If he takes with the pawn, then I go here and I should be safe. And once my queen joins the attack, then I should still be winning. But basically, what just happened, I lost two rooks for a queen. So it's not bad. Taking on h5 was not that bad. Pawn to g6 is also a very strong move. Let's just move the king out of the way. And if he takes with the pawn, I move the king. His knight is under attack. The knight has to move. And this is going to be hanging. Okay, so he took. If I go here, he check. I go here. He has nothing. I just want to ensure that once he moves the knight out the way, I'm able to take this pawn and I should be fine. So currently I'm ahead by one pawn, or 1 point. But once he moves the knight and I take this pawn, I'm going to be ahead by 2 points. I think black is still completely better here because yes, two queens are better than a rook, but it's best if the rooks are connected and coordinated with each other. For example, if they were lining up on a file or something, but since they're looking like this, then it's not good. Kinda, I kind of had a feeling that he was gonna put the knight on c6. Come on, bro, you can't be 1400. This is called a level 1 blunder, guys, where you put a piece on a square that the opponent was clearly guarding. Now I'm winning. I'm taking this next. I mean, maybe he's able to take here, but once I take, I'm hitting the rook. My queen joins the attack. This is GG's. All right, so he pulls the rook back. Now I'm going to hit him with queen g5, attack the unprotected rook, threatening ideas of queen g1. Bishop f3 is also a move. Okay, you see what he just did? Tactic alert, guys. You see what he just did? He moved his queen, his king, put the king and the rook on the same line. So bishop to f3 now pins the rook. And now it's just game over. I'm already ahead by 4 points. I'm about to win another 2 points. Once the rook falls, I can also roll my pawns up the board. All right, he moves the king. Now we just take the rook, and from here it's just going to be smooth sailing. More than likely, he's going to take with the knight. The pawn on f2 is also hanging, and the opponent resigns. More Owen's defense against 1500 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1500. More Owen's defense coming your way. Knight c3, we play bishop b7 and target the pawn. I'm going to explain in the membership video explaining the theory of this. I'm going to try to explain what happens if they don't play d4 immediately, you know? But okay, eventually it will transpose. I play e6, they play knight f3. It will always transpose in the same position. And he plays knight f3, now we play bishop e4, and then the plan is simple. Eliminate the knight, win the pawn on e4. Because I'm trying to do this, you're going to see people play bishop to d3. Once they do this, you play knight f6, and we're just going to keep attacking the pawn on e4. So hopefully you guys kind of understand the whole idea behind the Owens. I don't want you to try to say, if he plays this, I need to remember to play this. Once you know the idea, then everything becomes easy. Once they put the bishop on g5, pinning the knight, you just need to play h6, and this is going to be forcing him to give up the bishop for the knight. Now we're going to simply take with the queen, and already we have the bishop here, which means from here, we're just going to be playing chess. All right, pawn c5 was played. He got his king out the center of the board. I'm thinking about getting my king out the center. I like the idea of playing knight c6 though. But let's get the king out the center of the board first. Let's just get the king out the center first and remain principles. He still have control over the center. A move that I don't really want to play is d5, because once he plays e5, my light squared bishop is blocked in. So I may play d6 followed by knight d7, just to ensure that all the pieces are off the back rank, and then eventually I can hit him with c5. Okay, he voluntarily decided to play e5 anyways, and I'm not just gonna... Actually, I need to pull the queen back to d8, because if he plays knight e4, my bishop could be getting trapped and I may have to pull my bishop back to e7. The plan from here is to still target his pawns in the center. So pawn c5, pawn d6, and once I get rid of the pawns, black is going to be able to equalize. Okay, knight back to e1. I mean, it definitely makes some sense. I think he wants to play f4, f5, and then just start his attack, which means we definitely have to try to break down this guy's center. So let's just go ahead and play immediate c5. If he takes bishop takes, we're x-raying the king. If he plays a3, I'm actually not going to take this way. I'm thinking of taking this way, and then after he takes, I take this way. Because then his pawn on e5 is going to be very weak. Ooh, immediate queen to g4. The guy's trying to start some attack on my king. I was not expecting that. All right, so the plan is still to break down his position. Takes, queen takes, knight c6, there's queen e4. So I'm still going to take, so that way I'm exposing his e5 pawn. But I'm not going to play knight c6, because once he plays queen to e4 and threaten this mate, it's not going to be like a cheaper. Hopefully he don't see the mate. He's going to be forcing me to push pawns on the side that my king is on. And you never want to allow something like that. So once he takes with the queen, I'm going to first play bishop to c5 to force away the queen. Then I may think about playing knight c6, even though he's still able to put the queen on e4. But let's see. Okay, queen goes all the way back to g4. All right, now I have a little dilemma. Do I play knight c6 and allow queen e4? Or do I put my knight on the edge of the board? Because knight to e4 is probably coming. Do I even play f5? I kind of like f5 though. Because if I play f5 takes, queen takes, then it's helping my development. It's just that knight e4 is just always going to be so strong. Maybe I need to play knight a6 with the idea of going here. And if knight a6 and he plays a3, then I just come back to c7. And eventually I can still put my knight on the d5 square. Yeah, let's try that. Let's go knight a6. Okay, remember to not put your knight on the edge of the board, by the way, guys. If you're going to be putting your knight on the edge of the board, don't keep it on the edge of the board for too long. You put it on the edge of the board, it means you're trying to head somewhere else. I'm trying to head to b4 to hit the bishop, or c7 to centralize the knight. It's not to keep it on the edge of the board, because a knight on the edge of the board does not control a lot of squares. There's a saying, knight on the rim is dim. So he played a6. I was kind of expecting him to play a6. Now we pull the knight back to c7, so that way eventually the knight could get access to the d5 square. He plays b4, which is a very annoying move, by the way. Let's just pull the bishop back, and all of a sudden, his weak pawn on e5 is becoming very dangerous. So I'm probably going to play d6. Like f5 is an idea, but I mean, I'm pushing pawns on the side that my king is on, so it's tricky. I'm also thinking of just taking the knight once he plays knight e4, but then my rook is going to be under attack. It's weird. Okay, immediate pawn to f4, supporting his pawn. Pawn push takes, takes, pinning the knight. Queen to g6 could be very dangerous. Knight to d5 I now like, because it threatens this. After the trades, maybe he's able to play f5 though. Should I just play? Maybe I should just play f5, and if he takes, I play rook takes, so that way he's not able to go queen g6, but then knight e4 hits the rook, and then I have to give up the bishop for the knight and then play d5. I think that's one way to play. Another way to play is to play d5, but f5 is going to be strong. So let's go ahead and hit him with this f5 move. 100% expecting him to en passant. That was not good, bro. I think he would have been a bit more aggressive if he had en passant, but he didn't. So, oh well. No knight to d5 is going to be very strong. Takes, bishop takes, pawn c4 is very good. So let's just use the time to bring more pieces in the game. Rooks needs files at the end of the day. And my pawns are on the light squares, but my bishop is controlling this very nice diagonal. I really think he needed to en passant there, because now his light squared bishop is just pointing towards a pawn chain. Knight b6 is a very nice move. Hits the unprotected pawn. If I push, he goes here, and after takes, takes, my knight is under attack. If I go here to hit the pawn, this is hanging. But then after the trade, I'm going to be able to take back on d6, and I should be doing fine. Or I could just take on b5. What am I saying? Just take on b5, bro. So he took with the bishop. Now I'm going to play queen to c7, applying some pressure to c7, to c2. Rook to d8 is coming. And funny enough, my pawn on d6 is in fact a weakness. It's not on the 6th or the 5th, but because it's backward, and if I move it forward, he's going to take, and I'm also weakening this, it is considered to be a weakness. Okay, and he's applying pressure to the weakness. Let's just play rook to d8 and protect the pawn. He has two attackers. I have two defenders. I'm thinking about playing bishop to c6 if he tries to add more attackers. His pawn on c2 and a3 is weak though, so if I'm able to play a move like queen to c3, then I will be targeting the weakness. And if I'm trying to get my light dark squared bishop a bit more active, I'm thinking of playing a5, so that way after the trade, this pawn is hanging, and if he doesn't trade, then I'm just going to take. All right, so he pulls the bishop back. I mean, that didn't do anything, bro. Where's that bishop even pointing? Maybe he wants to play g4. Now his pawn on a3 is weak, and my goal is to target the weakness, so I'm gonna play queen c3. And before, queen c3 wouldn't have worked because he would have been able to play rook d3. Now there's no rook d3. There's also no rook to a1. But there's no rook to f3. I was about to say there's rook f3, and if I take, he takes, but there's no rook f3. Look on the guy's knight on e1. It's not doing anything. Okay, he puts the bishop back on a6, because if I takes and then he plays queen takes, then the pawn is guarded. That was a very nice idea. And I can't really do anything else, because if I protect it, he's going to eventually play rook to d3. That was a nice idea. All right, how do we do this? Do I take still, or do I just pull the queen back? That was very nice. Let's just pull the queen back to defend the bishop. That was a nice move that he just found. And he's also eliminating his bishop that was not really good for my bishop, which was basically cutting the board in half. But at the end of the day, his pawns are still weak, and I still have the same plans to attack his pawn. But at the end of the day, My pawn on d7 is also weak. Now he's able to play all of these moves that he weren't able to play. All right, how am I going to do this? Let's start by playing pawn to a5. After the trade, a3 is going to be weak and my bishop is going to be able to join the attack. So he took, we take back. Pawn is not hanging because the rook is guarding it. Now, this is basically my plan. Notice what his plan is, targeting d7. My plan, target c2 and a3. So the player who is able to attack the weakness better will basically win this game. So let's go rook to c7, adding more defense to the pawn. And I'm also trying to play rook to c8 to double up on the c pawn. Okay, that's a move. I'm not really seeing what it does though, but it's definitely a move because he's putting a piece on my half of the board. Like the queen by itself is not going to be doing anything too dangerous. Let's see. Let's continue with the plan. Rook here, doubling up on the c pawn. Like maybe his plan is just to never move the knight, because if he never moves the knight, then taking the pawn is just not going to be good. That was the idea. Now I'm seeing what he's trying to do. He's basically trying to attack me here. And he's also threatening to take on h6, which is a very nice move. How do we do this? Because if I put the king here, I'm mated. If I put the king here, he goes here. But then I just pull the bishop back and I should be doing safe. All right, there has to be a more aggressive way to defend against this. Let's start by playing the most forcing move in the position, which is a check. And then after he moves the king out the way, I may play queen to f2, which threatens checkmate here, and attack this pawn. But he's able to play rook to f3, though. That's the thing. After rook to f3, maybe I'm able to play queen e2 and attack his unprotected rook. Again, guys, offense is still the best defense. Sometimes someone is attacking you. The best way to defend is by attacking them back. So he moves the king. Now I'm going to hit him with this move. Let's hit him with this move. If I play here, what if he moves the knight though? You have to be careful. Maybe he's able to move the knight. I mean, queen takes h6. I also have another idea, guys. Like, let's say I wasn't threatening mate and he played queen takes h6. I could actually sack my queen for the rook, because once he takes my queen, then I'm going to be able to take his queen. Okay, knight f3. That was actually the most aggressive move I was expecting him to play, because he's guarding the mate, and queen to g6 is still a threat, but trying to take this pawn. And if his rook leaves the back rank, let's say it takes here, then I'm able to check his king. So I'm going to take the free pawn, queen to g6, bishop to f8. If he takes this pawn, I check. Pawn to h3 is a move at that point, but then I'm able to pull the rook back and defend my pawn. So that is indeed a free pawn. So we grab the pawn. And again, guys, remember, queen takes h6 is not a move. My pawn is not able to take now, but the queen is attacking the rook. Tactics alert! Queen takes h6 is bad. This is also a pattern that I want you guys to know, because a lot of times persons are going to do this against you, and you're able to play the brilliant queen takes g6, just sacrificing your queen for the rook. And it also wins an entire rook, because once he now takes the queen, I take his queen. I just have the extra rook on the board, and just like that, I'm completely winning the game. Because I'm ahead in material, now my goal is to start trading. Okay, he's trading. Let's just take. He's hitting the pawn, not a pawn that I'm able to easily defend. Maybe I could check and then check him here. I have a little idea. I'm going to try to checkmate him. So check him here first, and then once the king move, then I pull back and threaten this. And I'm also threatening to checkmate here. I mean, he just needs to go back with the king, to be honest. King there does not help, bro, because that's just a checkmate. More Owen's defense against 1600 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1600. More Owen's defense coming your way. So d4, we go bishop to b7. We're always going to try to target that pawn on e4. There's bishop to d3 and knight c3. These are the two main moves they use to defend the pawn. I explained this in the membership on the video. Ensure to join the membership if you're not yet a member. But the whole idea is we're going to play pawn e6, try to target this knight, which is the main defender of the pawn, eliminate the knight, and then take the pawn. So he plays knight to f3. Now we start rolling in with the attack. Bishop to b4. We develop both bishops, but his position is already under attack. If he plays a weird looking move like a3 here, not seeing that the knight is the main defender of the pawn, he loses. Now he plays bishop to d3. What do? Knight to f6. This is kind of like the whole idea, guys. Target the e-pawn, get the knight on e4 if they push. If they play queen e2, play d5. I'm going to be explaining What happens if they play bishop to d3 before knight c3? What happens if they play knight c3 before bishop d3? You know, those are the moves I'm going to be explaining in the theory. So now that he plays queen e2, notice what he's doing. He knows that his knight is not a defender because it's pinned. So he's trying to ensure that he has as many defenders on e4 as possible. And what are we going to do? Add as many attackers on e4 as possible. Now I'm going to play this move d5. Now another thing that I'm going to be explaining is if they take queen takes d5 is actually good because the knight is pinned. And if they play e5, we play knight e4, and already we're applying pressure to their pinned knight. So he did play e5. A lot of persons play knight d7 and c5, play it like a French, but knight e4 is just way more aggressive. Like some persons actually take on e4 here, which is bad because okay, the knight is not able to take, but if the bishop takes and we take back, we hit the knight, which is the main defender of this pawn on d4. So the Owen's defense is basically one of those openings where you notice what he just did? Now I take, hit the unprotected knight. Maybe he thinks queen to b5 checks the king and win my bishop, but it doesn't because I can always play knight c6. He moves the knight out the way, and naturally there was a drawback. The pawn on d4 is no longer guarded. We take the free pawn, and nine moves into the Owens, and we're already ahead in material. So the whole idea of the Owens is just okay. We give them control over the center with pawns, but we control the center with pieces, and then we start to attack their center. So now his pawn on e5 is hanging, and I'm also attacking the knight on c3 twice. So he develops the bishop to add some defense to the knight. And okay, if I takes bishop takes, my queen is under attack. That can never work. Bishop a6 hits the queen, but the queen takes, so that doesn't work. So let's just take the free pawn. I mean, I'm also expecting my pawn on e4 to be hanging, but now I'm ahead by 2 pawns, which means once he tries to take back this pawn, then I'm still going to be ahead by a pawn. But he still needs to be careful because the moment this knight moves out of the way, his pawn on b2 could be hanging. So he just decides to castle the king. Now, what I don't want to do is be too greedy here. Like, knight takes e4 is just gonna come. And maybe I'm gonna have to take the bishop first. So I need to focus on my development at this point. I'm already ahead in material. Let's just get the king out the center of the board, playing some regular chess. My h7 focal point could be under attack if he plays queen h5. But once I play pawn h6, I should be fine. So all he needs to do now is just to take back 1 pawn. I'm still going to be ahead by a pawn. And then we just need to win a very normal game. Whoa, guy plays h4. Guy played h4, which means he's just going for the attack. He doesn't care about getting back the pawn. So you know what I'm going to do with that? I'm not going to allow him to take the pawn again. Okay, what if I just give him one last chance? Knight c6. Let's say he takes the pawn this time. Well, if I play f5, what is stopping him from still taking the pawn? Check. Oh no, there's no knight takes. So maybe I should play f5. If queen h5, there's h6, but then there's queen g6, and if I takes, my h7 point is just gonna be under attack. Let's not be greedy, guys. I like the idea of knight d7, but it is unprotected on the same line as the bishop. So knight d7, pawn a3. Maybe I'm just going to pull back to d6 and I'm fine. Knight d7, there's no bishop moves that I'm too afraid of. So let's just go knight d7. Knight c6 was a move. I just didn't want to block my light squared bishop. Oh, guy's so aggressive. He's just keep rolling the pawn up the board. All right, there's actually something about this move that is not good. And I think I'm able to punish him for it because this bishop is an overworked piece. This is one of the weaknesses that you guys need to be able to spot in your game so that way you're able to find tactics, and I talk about this a lot in my book. So basically, because the bishop is overworked guarding both knights, what happens if I take this knight? If I choose to take this knight, he's not able to take with the bishop because he needs to guard this knight. And if he has to take with the pawn, that's like the ugliest double pawns to have. And that's one less piece attacking my pawn on e5. So let's just take on c3. And another thing to keep in mind, guys, is how to choose the move. That's something that I talk about because sometimes you see the idea, but there's also a process that you need to take in regards to choosing the move to play. But because there's a piece already on my half of the board and a pawn is threatening to go to h6 to start the attack, let's just hit him with h6, neutralizing the knight. This is called the principle of neutralization. A piece is on your half of the board, don't allow it there. Chase it away. So the knight decided to go back. My knight is still unprotected. Remember, do not only see the opponent's weaknesses, see your weaknesses as well. But right now, what are the weaknesses in the opponent's position? Remember, guys, if you want to be good at chess, if you want to be able to spot tactics, this is the answer. being able to identify weaknesses. So right now, the a2 pawn is unprotected and his king is a bit exposed. So the first thing that comes to mind is queen a5 hit the pawn. Maybe he's going to play something like king b1. And I like the idea of playing bishop to d5 to apply more pressure, but then he's able to play pawn c4. So I have to ensure that I'm on the lookout for that. Maybe I'm still going to play queen to a5 though. And then after he plays king to b1, I play something like bishop a6, hit the queen. So that way, once the queen moves away, then I play bishop c4, and I'm not going to be seeing any way to defend the a2 pawn. And by the way, it is a focal point, assuming the king goes to b1. If the king doesn't go to b1, then it's a free pawn. But if the king goes to b1, then all of these squares that is around the king becomes focal point. Now, I know that I'm saying this a lot, guys, but for some reason, I just don't think the average person understand how to attack someone's king and what to look for. But this is what you need to be looking for, the focal points. Okay, so he plays queen c4. I mean, he's guarding the pawn. He's hitting my pawn. Don't care about that pawn. There's also queen to b4 that he's more than likely going to play. Especially if I play bishop to d5, he's going to play queen b4. But okay, I'm already ahead by 2 pawns. I can always trade the queen and then take on a2. But let's see if I'm able to checkmate him. Oh, check him here. King moves. Hit him with bishop to d5, which means if he moves the queen out the way, a2 is hanging, and he's not able to move his queen and defend a2 at the same time, which means queen to a3 is the winning move. Maybe I should have told you guys that a tactic was there, but I mean, sometimes I put notes on the screen to help you guys to find the tactic. But bishop to d5 here ends the game. Now, another thing that you guys need to, in order to get good at chess, is your pattern recognition also needs to be on par. So for example, the moment you understand focal points and you're like, okay, these are the squares that I need to attack, there's going to be a lot of different patterns in which you can attack and target these squares. And once you mix those together, it's over. And that's what my book is about. He moves the queen out the way. And not seeing any checkmate. I mean, there's check, king over, but there's no discovered attack, seeing that way my queen is under attack. So let's just take on a2 with check. The king is now forced to move out the way. And if I check, he's just going to block with the queen. I mean, I'm ahead by 3 points, so shouldn't care too much about him blocking with the queen. But right now, I'm going to try to focus on bringing even more pieces in the attack. So it's either knight to e5 heading to c4 or knight to c5 heading to a4. I like knight to c5 a bit more because the c4 square, the knight on c4 controls some very important squares. Okay, that was not a bad move. He's using his queen to defend his king. And taking the queen followed by knight c4 is completely winning, by the way, guys. But remember, whenever you're winning, not just winning, I don't want to say whenever you're winning, whenever you're attacking someone, especially whenever you're attacking the king, do not trade the pieces off the board. Because whenever someone is defending, the best way to neutralize the attack is by trading. So keep the pieces on the board. That way you're able to go for mate. So now I'm trying to go for checkmate instead of taking the queen and going to this long endgame, which would also still be winning. So he moves the bishop. Now we hit him with knight c4, hit the queen. Notice also what this knight is doing. It's preventing the opponent's king from ever running away. Knight to c4 actually wins the queen, guys. Like, this is now just GG. It's over. Tactics alert, tactics alert. How do we continue from here? Very, very simple. First, we have to ensure that we're looking for moves on the opponent's half of the board. These moves needs to be the checks, the captures, and the threats. And while you're calculating, do not stop calculating until you have no more checks. So after the first check, for example, let's say we play queen to a1 check, he blocks. We need to be looking for more checks after he blocks with the queen. So for example, now he blocks with the queen. What are the follow-up checks? Queen a3 check. The king is not able to move. He is forced to block the check with the queen. He blocks with the queen, and that's just checkmate. More Owen's defense against 1700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1700. More Owen's defense coming your way. So d4, and we're already just targeting their pawn on e4. He guards it. Now we play e6. The plan is to go bishop to b4, eliminate this knight, and then win the pawn. So knight to f3, we go bishop to b4, eliminating the knight, winning the pawn. This is something that I'm going to be explaining in the theory video. So there's going to be a video on the channel in the membership where I explain the full Owen's defense theory. So bishop to d3 was played. Plan from here is to continue with the attack. Knight goes to f3. Now we have two pieces attacking the pawn. He only has one because the knight is pinned. And okay, he decides to play the move pawn to e4. But I am still going to jump in my knight to e4 because now I'm applying pressure to the knight twice. And if he plays bishop to d2, then I'm just going to eliminate the bishop. So bishop to d2 was played. Now we eliminate the bishop. And there's actually something very cool that you guys need to notice here. Once the queen takes, he's no longer guarding the knight. Bishops are better than knights. Do not give up your bishop for the knight. Why am I going to play bishop takes f3? The only time you should be giving up your bishop for the knight is if you can tell what you get from the position. And in this position, I get to double up his pawns, and I'm also able to play this move, queen to h4, which is already targeting his weak pawn on d4. I'm going to be able to play knight c6 and attack the d4 pawn. I'm going to be able to get my king out the center of the board, and this cannot be bad. And that's why he's playing this move, pawn to a3, by the way, because he wants me to take, and then once he takes, he's protecting the pawn, but that's going to be too easy for him. So let's just pull the bishop back to e7, not giving up both of the bishops, and then I'm going to play knight to c6 next, assuming he defends his pawn. Okay, that was definitely a good move. He's guarding the pawn and he's attacking my pawn at the same time. Pawn to c6. Okay, can't do that. And if I play knight a6, it's unprotected. Bad thing happens when you have unprotected pieces. I have a nice little idea though. Like, pull back. If queen c3, there's knight c6. So let's just pull back to d8. It's an uncomfortable move, but eventually I'm definitely going to play pawn to a6 because we don't allow pieces on our half of the board anyways. Now, there's also this bishop to e4 move that he could play, which hits the rook, but then I'm just going to play knight c6. And once I play a6, I should just be doing fine. All right, so he pulls the bishop back, which means the queen is now the main defender of the d4 pawn. Pieces on your half of the board, do not hesitate to force that piece away. So let's hit him with pawn to a6, kick the knight, knight back to, after he plays knight back to c3, it's also harder for him to play pawn c3. I'm assuming he's going to be able to play knight e4 though and cut off the communication, but we have to ensure that we're developing and we have to ensure that we're attacking. Now we have two pieces attacking d4. Castling loses the game on the spot, so he has to play the move knight e4. Okay, I didn't see that move. Pawn d5. I mean, it definitely has a drawback though. I mean, clearly the pawn was the main defender of e5. It's no longer guarding e5. That's a pawn, bro. But let's say I take. What's his idea? Because my king is not the safest. If I take, that's an attacking move. I'm just going to move. Like, why is this not a pawn? Because then if he takes, I'm just going to take back. I'm chilling. That's a pawn, bro. 14 moves into the Owens, we won the central pawns. Remember, guys, in the Owens, you give white control over the center of the board with pawns, but you secretly control the center of the board with your pieces. So maybe they're going to think, yo, why is this guy not trying to control the center? You're trying to control the center, but you're doing it with pieces instead of pawns. Now he has the ugliest double pawns. He's down by a pawn. Castling on the king is bad here. Tactics alert, tactics alert. The guy just castled his king. I want you guys to notice something that happens once the king is castled. He puts his king and the queen on the same line. In my book, this is called pieces on the same line. So what I'm going to do here, I have a dark squared bishop. Everything is on a dark square. I'm going to hit him with bishop to g5, and it just wins the queen. Because now if he plays pawn to f4, I take on f4, and I'm still covering the f4 square. He moves the opponent resigns. More Owen's defense against 1,800 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,800. More aggressive Owens defense coming your way. Wow, look at that. F4. Guy didn't play d4. We're still going to go bishop to b7 and target the pawn though, but f4 is definitely an interesting way to play. He plays knight c3. Let's continue with the plan. Pawn e6. Still want to play bishop to b4 and apply some pressure to the knight, but now he plays knight to f3. So bishop to b4, I'm assuming he's going to play d3. But let's continue with the plan. It's the same plan. Even though the knight is not pinned, the knight is the only defender of the pawn on e4. So if he plays any weird move, we eliminate that knight, take the pawn on e4, and we're winning the game, which is why he played d3. Now, d3 is not bad because d3 protected the pawn. And if I play knight f6, I'm now no longer able to play knight e4, which is why instead of playing knight f6, I'm going to play d5. So the moves are still not that hard to find. Once it's a move that attacks the opponent's e4 pawn, then we're going for it. And another thing to keep in mind is once they take on d5, if the knight is pinned, taking with the queen is always good because you have your queen in the center of the board. The only time the rule says do not develop the queen too early is because minor pieces are able to attack it. The knight on c3 isn't attacking the queen because of the pin, and we're going to be taking on c3 very soon. So he did take on d5. Now we play queen takes d5. The queen is now not pinned. So from here, it's just regular development, and his pawn on f4 now looks very weird. So he develops the bishop, didn't do anything. Let's just continue with our development. I'm going to play the move knight to f6 here. Just finish my development, getting my king out the center of the board. Let's go knight f6. That was a trick. The knight is no longer pinned. Do not be falling for these little tricks. Now, I have so I could take bishop takes knight f6. I think this is the fastest way to do it because even if I pull the queen back, he's able to play knight e5. So it's kind of like the process of elimination. I kind of have to do it. Give up the bishop here. Yes, he's going to have a very strong bishop targeting my unprotected pawn. But now I simply develop my knight to f6. And if he wants to give up the bishop and double up my pawns, I mean, that's also fine. My next move is to play knight d7. And then I'm going to choose where I'm planning on castling my king. So he's developing, regular development move. The plan is to get the king out the center of the board. Let's develop as well. And if he chooses to castle on the king side, I may just castle on the queen side and then try to start an attack on his king because okay, I mean, come on, bro, lock in. Why would you move the knight to e5 like that? Like, do you see the pressure that I have on this diagonal? I'm not even assuming anything. That's just a pawn, Mr. 1800. We're 10 moves into the Owens, bro. So let's say we take, right? There's never going to be any bishop f3 because my bishop covers the square. So if I take bishop f3, I takes, maybe queen takes, but hey, I'm ahead by a pawn. That's fine. That's a pawn, bro. Let's just grab the pawn. Moving the rook out the way will even cause him more pawns. So maybe he has to just play bishop f3 and just accept the fact that he's down by a pawn. Yeah, that's exactly what he did. Now we're just going to trade. If he plays queen takes, then I have to trade queens because my rook on a1 is going to be under attack. But let's just take. The knight has to take. We're ahead by a pawn. Should not be hard for us to win this game. Now, there's something that I need to be careful about, though. If I castle, okay, maybe I am able to castle and then play g6. But I still need to be careful because I'm gonna have some wicked dark square weaknesses. I want to go knight d5, hit the bishop, hit the pawn. But once I go knight d5, he's gonna take this pawn. And if I go here, I'm assuming bishop back to e5 isn't too bad. But let me think about it. Takes, pawn takes. I have a knight here. Knight e3 prevents castling. Maybe I could go here, but then he's just going to castle. I'm just going to use the time to get my king out the center of the board. It's a bit dangerous, to be honest, because once he plays rook g1, I'm not able to move my knight. If he doesn't play rook g1, then I'll move the knight. But if he decides to play rook g1, I have to play g6 first before I move the knight. If queens were on the board, then I wouldn't even consider doing something like this. So he did play rook to g1, which means I'm not able to move the knight. So we have to play pawn to g6 first. My king is safe, by the way. Like, if he wants to expose my king, he has to start looking into some pawn breaks. And h4, h5 is going to take too long, and f5 is impossible. So he jumps in with the knight. And I mean, I'm ahead in material, so let's wait. If I takes, bishop takes, he hits the knight, hits the pawn. Knight d5 is a move, but then he has c4. I like the idea of rook to d1, but knight c6 could be annoying. So it's actually a very tricky scenario. If rook d1, he plays knight c6. Then I may just move my rook back out the way. And it's not like he's going to put his knight back. Because if he put his knight back, then I get this rook to e1 move for free. I think my worst case scenario move is just to take the knight and play knight d5. But I want to see if I'm able to get away with playing rook to d1 first. Boom. Yeah, let's do this. Yeah, let's just hit the knight first. Slightly tricky. If he decides to take on d7, can't take with the rook, we have to take back with the knight. Otherwise, we're losing the pawn on f6. He did play knight c6. We're going back to e8, putting the rook on the same line as the king. Some ideas of e5 is now possible. And if he plays knight e5, then maybe I have to just take. Or maybe put this rook on d1, and then once he goes back. But yeah, there's nothing to do with this a rook. So I think now is the time to cash in. If knight e5 I takes, bishop takes, and then maybe knight here. It's a tricky position, but I'm ahead by a pawn. So he went back with the knight. All right. If I move the knight, I lose this knight. If I protect the knight, there's knight c6, which means we have to take. If I takes, bishop goes here, hit the knight, hit the pawn. Knight d5 guards the pawn, pawn c4. Trying to do removing the guard, but that weakens too much scores. There's already f6 that I'm able to play, and there's knight b4, which threatens a fork. I'm also attacking this pawn, so I'm not afraid of that. So let's centralize the knight, guard the pawn. f6 is an idea. knight b4 is an idea. I am expecting c4, but it just doesn't work. It just shouldn't work. And even if there's some magical way where he has to take the pawn, just rook to c8 hits the bishop, and I should also be winning back this pawn. So he did play c4. Knight c4 threatens a fork and an unprotected pawn. The only way to not lose this is to put the rook or the king here, and this is very good for me. I could push takes. Wait, can I win another pawn? Let's think about this, guys. My knight is under attack. This is called danger levels. Remember, offense is the best defense. I play f6. He takes a knight, I take a bishop. Equal. If he takes a pawn, I take a pawn. This is going to be hanging. Pawn d4 protects it, but pawn c5 hits the pawn. That's winning a pawn. So let's check the other variation. Knight b4 threatens the fork. King guards the fork, swing the rook in the game. Pawn push, and that's decent. Let's actually go with f6. Wait, if f6 and he pulls the bishop back, yeah, let's just play f6. I'm very safe here. If you're still watching this video and you're watching up to the 1800 section, then I appreciate you guys so much. Just remember to like the video, though. If you haven't liked the video, remember to hit that like button. We're trying to get 1000 likes this video. So this is what we looked on. We take on d5. We're now still ahead by a pawn. And remember, once you're in the end game, or once you're ahead in material, the goal is to simplify. The rook attacks the pawn. The pawn is the only defender of the pawn. Pawn to c5. And what I'm basically doing is I'm trying to remove the main defender of the pawn. He castled the king, but now we simply take the pawn. Technically, I'm ahead by 2 pawns now, but after he takes back the pawn, then I take. Now I'm ahead by 2 pawns. We're about to play an endgame. And a lot of you guys are not good in the end game. If you want to be better in the end game, there's a link in the description which will take you to my Patreon. I have a 4.5 hour end game video that you can watch. It helps you in the end game from 0 to 2000. Okay, now he goes rook to d1, applying so much pressure to the pawn, like checking him first. Maybe I should check him so that way he steps the king in front, and that should give me more time to use my king to defend the pawn. But if I check him first and he moves his king to b1, then I play rook to d8 to defend my pawn. And in the end game, you don't really want to move your king away from the action. You know, you need your king in the game. So once he moves the king, that's when I'm going to play rook to d1. And usually if there was a pawn on the c or the e file, he would simply need to apply more pressure to my pawn and I'm losing, or just losing the pawn. But now it's just easily get the king in the game, ensure that I'm using my king to protect my pawn. No one of my rooks are just free to start roaming around. And another thing that you guys need in terms of winning in the end game is being able to spot pawn majority. I want you guys to notice how I have 2 pawns versus 1 pawn. So apart from the fact that I'm going to try to win this pawn, if I have to just play h6 followed by g5 and just trade the pawns off the board, then I'm going to have a pass pawn, which I'm going to be using to start rolling up the board. So he moves his king again, didn't really do much. Really didn't do much moving that king. Okay, putting my rook here is an idea, but I'll prefer putting my rook on this open file more. Notice what I did. I used my king to protect the pawn. Now this rook is free to roam about the board. That was not a bad move. He's trying to take advantage of the drawback of my last move. All right, I want to check him, force the king to move here. Maybe he wants to check me here, but I'm always going to be able to go back. I don't want his rook on my 7th rank. That's going to be my issue. And speaking of 7th rank, a simple king to d6 just defends everything. Now, this is called entry in the end game. It's very important that you're able to see all the entry points that the opponent is able to get to. Okay, he puts the king here. Pawn push is only going to let his king in. I actually want to play rook to e4, just to trade the pieces off the board. If he takes and I take, then I'm the only one with a pass pawn, and it's going to be easier for me to win the game if I trade pieces off the board. Remember, guys, you're ahead in material, especially if you're ahead by pawns. The whole purpose of the principle that says trade when you're ahead in material is this. It's to win in the end game. So he checks the king. If I put the king here, I'm assuming he's going to get access to my 7th rank, but something is telling me that it is still winning. There's also a king here, which protects the 7th rank. He goes here. Okay, that's what I'm going to do, because once I protect the pawn, I'm also attacking his pawn, and I'm also putting my rook on the same line as his king, which means if I have to play king up and then he moves the rook, I can push the pawn. It comes with check. So very, very promising position here. So he moves the king. Guy doesn't care about anything. He's just trying to get my pawns. Now I'm thinking of just start rolling my pass pawn up the board. That's what you do when you have pass pawns. You have to roll them up the board. So pass pawns must be pushed. If he plays king to d3 or this move, my whole idea was to check him on f5 first. And then once he moves the king, then I go here to protect my pawn. He also needed to put the king here so that way he's at least able to take my pawn. Like, he's really not playing this endgame well. And this is what I tell you guys about the endgame. It's like, okay, you could be playing someone who is very, very strong, but then the moment it reaches the endgame, you see their true strength. All right, so he's hitting both of my pawns. Past pawns were still meant to be pushed. I'm not going to lose both of the pawns, by the way, but I think I have to lose one of them. Once he takes this pawn, I'm going to push, and the rook guards the pawn. Maybe he's going to try to create his own pass pawn, but I'm also going to be creating my own pass pawn. It's a very simple plan to win this game. And remember when I tell you guys about the pawn majority? Okay, I still have to think about it. If I push takes takes, he push and I takes takes, I get to roll this pawn up the board. He's going to roll this pawn up the board. I can always use my king, and if I have to sacrifice my rook for his pawn, I'm going to have two pawns, and it's just winning. So still just completely winning here. Let's just take back, and pass pawns were meant to be pushed. He created his pass pawn. Let's just take. And once he takes back, I roll my pawn up the board. And the fact that he also has a rook pawn, it's even harder when it's a rook pawn. All right, now I need to ensure that I'm activating my king. I want to get my king as close as possible to protecting my pawns. So that way, if I have to sacrifice my rook, it's very easy. So king up, he push, and then I simply go back. And that's just winning. So let's go king up. We have two pawns. That is going to be rolling up the board. Okay, maybe I could check. And if he goes here, I check and then I take. Nah, but that's just wasting time though. Let's just go here. Now if he takes, I play king takes. Swinging the rook over doesn't help. I'm just going to roll the pawns up the board, and eventually I'm going to win one of his rook, and I'm going to be the only one with a queen on the board. So he moves the king. Pass pawns were meant to be pushed. If he queens the pawn, I'm just going to take, and king here wins the game. Now, rook to c8 is a nice little try. He wants to put the rook here, and then after takes, I can't prevent him from queening. Oh, wait, did I just make a mistake? But if I check, he blocks. What the heck? Wait, check, blocks, then I queen. And if he queen, I check, take the queen, take the rook, and I win the game. That was close. I did not see that, but tactics is also very important. Now I simply need to queen my pawn, protecting the rook. If he takes, I takes, and I'm winning. And if he queens the pawn, the king and the king and the queen is on the same line. Queen to d5, takes the queen, take the rook. We win the game. He queens the pawn. Now we simply need to check the king, forcing the king to move. He moves the king, and yeah, that's just a free queen. Well, he's going to be able to take my rook, but eventually I should be able to win this game. My plan from here is to sacrifice my queen for his rook. Once I'm able to sacrifice my queen for the rook, I'm just going to have a free queen on the board, and that's how I'm going to win this game. So we sacrifice, roll the pawn, and that's how we win. So now we're just going to queen this pawn, and the opponent resigns. More Owen's defense against 1900 players. Stick around. Your opponent is now 1900. Let's hit him with some more Owen's defense. Before we go bishop to b7, we already know the idea. Now we go e6. We know why we're going e6. All of these moves we understand. Like usually they put the bishop on d3 though, because now he's not able to play e5 because he's going to be blundering the rook. He's yo 1900 by the way. I attack his pawn on e4 twice. I didn't even guard the pawn. That's a pawn, bro. 1900 by the way. And we're already winning a pawn. 6 moves into the Owen's defense. Okay, he castled his king. And let me just get my king out the center of the board. And by the way, guys, if you like what you're seeing so far and you're still watching the video, consider hitting that like button. I'd love to hit 1000 likes in this video. Okay, now he plays d5. It's a decent move. I guess he's trying to trade some pieces off the board. To take is still a mistake, so let's still use that time to get our king out the center of the board. And then if he takes, we could consider how we want to take back. Okay, now he's hitting my bishop. If I takes, queen takes, knight c6, that's fine. But let me just pull the bishop back to g6. Can't pull the bishop back here because of the pawn, but okay, my bishop is still fine there. All right, so he's trying to complete his development, which makes a lot of sense. And now I'm going to simply take on d5 because I also need to finish my development. And the pawn was preventing knight c6. Now, it doesn't really matter how he decides to take back. I'm going to play pawn c6. And then after he makes his move, I'm going to play pawn d5. And I'm going to have very good control over the center. So he took to hit the rook. Let's hit him with c6, attacking the bishop. And then once the bishop move, I play d5, and I have very nice control over the center of the board. Still need to finish my development, though. This knight is still not doing anything. Right, queen e2 was played. He's applying some pressure to my bishop. Now, rook to e1 is fine. Okay, I was thinking about playing bishop to f6 though, because I still save the bishop. I'm attacking his unprotected pawn, and I would like my next move to be knight d7, because my knight could also be heading to c5. But notice how all his pieces are still active, so it's not the end of the game here. All right, so c3 was played, just guarding the pawn. Let's finish our development. I want to play knight c5, maybe rook e8. I'm ahead by a pawn, just trying to trade the pieces off the board and win the endgame here, especially since his pieces seems to be a bit more active than mine. All right, he got his last piece in the game. Rook to e8, maybe he's just going to trade off everything, which I'm completely fine with because I'm the one who is ahead in material. So if he takes, I just take. Rook takes, I just takes, and I have the file. If he moves the queen, then I play knight c5. Hit the bishop, knight could be going to e4. He did move the queen out the way. Let's continue to improve our position. And remember, guys, we are ahead by a pawn. So we're just chilling here. We're trying to trade the pieces off the board. All right, knight e4 attacks my weakest pawn. If I takes, I'm giving him the bishop here, but I could also just take his bishop, and the goal is to trade anyways. But since I'm trying to connect the rooks, let's just play queen d7, connect the rook, defend the pawn. I'm just chilling. There's also knight e4 ideas here. Oh, whoa, tactics alert, tactics alert. He's attacking my bishop, thinking I'm going to take, but then he takes back. But now we have a tactic. We have a knight, so we should be looking for forks. Hit him with knight e4, which hits the queen and the bishop. In this position, he is forced to sacrifice his rook because, okay, if he moves the queen, we take the free bishop. If he sack the rook, we're just going to take back the rook. And yes, he's going to double up our pawns, but we're getting extra material. 1900! By the way, blundered his queen and then he resigns. More Owen's defense against 2000 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 2000, playing some more aggressive Owen's defense. So d4, we go bishop to b7. Oh, look at that. d5. So what he's basically doing, he's saying, hey, your bishop is not active once I play immediate d5. So that's not a terrible plan. I'm thinking about just playing e6, but once he takes, I don't want to take with the d pawn. So maybe I have to take with the f pawn, which is kind of weird, but I don't think it does a lot of harm to my position. Now he plays c4. Okay, if I takes knight f6, that's what I'm going to do. So the plan remains the same, but he took with the e pawn. Whoa, I wasn't expecting him to take with the e pawn. He's really trying to play against my bishop. Let's just still develop though. We're going to develop. Eventually, I'm going to be able to play c6 and target that pawn, but I'm expecting knight c3, bishop b4, and I just get my king out the center. So he develops his knight. Yeah, let's develop the bishop with check. I think he needs to block with the bishop. Queen e7 check is also an idea. I'm assuming he's just going to block with the queen though. Hmm. I could take. I don't want to take. It's just going to help him to develop. Let's go queen e7 check. If he blocks with the bishop, then I castle. If he blocks with the queen, I may still castle. Remember, guys, to take is still a mistake. And you should only trade if it improves your position. So he blocks with the bishop. Now we're just going to get our queen or king out the center. He also got his king out the center. The thing is, the move I want to play is d6. Okay, maybe I need to play c6 because c6 hits the pawn immediately. And if he takes, he's helping my development. But then I could be getting isolated pawns. Very weird. So if he takes, I may have to take with the c pawn, which technically could be wasting time. I don't want to take on d2 because it helps his development. Something is telling me that I have to do it though. And rook to e1 is also coming, which will be putting his rook on the same line as my queen. So maybe I have to take on d2, help his knight to be developed, play d6, and then my next move is probably knight d7 followed by knight c5. Once he plays rook to e1, he's putting his rook on the same line as my queen though. So I have to be very careful. So the rook is on the same line as the queen. There is knight a6 though. I like knight a6. Because the only discovered attack that he has with the bishop is, oh my god, I just blundered. No, I didn't blunder. Because if he plays c5, I'm able to take with the knight. But then he plays b4, and once I move my knight, he moves the bishop and take here. And this is what I tell you guys, whenever someone puts their rook on the same line as your queen, you have to move your queen out the way. Because pawn to c5 is actually a very threatening move. If c5, knight takes b4, I may have to play knight e4, and then bishop e4 is just so strong. But then I should be able to play bishop d5. I don't know. It's a very weird position. Okay, he just decides to move the queen because the discovered attack didn't do anything. And now I need to move my queen out the way. I'm not really trying to allow this guys to get anything too aggressive. So rook to e1, knight c5, pawn a5, and then all my pieces are going to be fine. My light squared bishop is still pointing towards a pawn chain. Usually if your bishop is pointing towards a pawn chain, your plan is to attack the base of the pawn chain. Okay, he plays knight e4. That's definitely a suspicious move because I'm able to gain a free tempo here. Take the knight, queen is in the center, knight c5, and that's a tempo on the queen. So that was definitely suspicious. I'm assuming he's trying to get his queen over to h4 and then play knight g5, but an attack on my king is not going to work if the center of the board is open, bro. Now I'm going to play a prophylactic move, pawn to a5. The purpose of a5 is to prevent b4. And eventually I need to do something better about my light squared bishop. In some cases, I could play b5, and if he takes, I take on d5. But I think I need to get my major pieces in the game first. Knight to g5. He's going for it. He is going for it. He's threatening a checkmate here, by the way, guys. So we have to play pawn to h6 and chase away that knight. Maybe he wants to play knight e4 and then just trade. Maybe he just wants an endgame. You know, who knows? Okay, was expecting knight going to e4, and I mean I could play immediate rook e1, but I don't really want him to double up my pawns, and especially since he's going to give me a tempo. Once I take, his queen takes. It's very easy for me to just play rook to e8, hit the queen, force the queen to move, and we're doing fine. Now, there's one thing I'm thinking about here, which is it's kind of scary, but thinking about playing queen e7 next, so that way I have full control over the e file. I'm probably not gonna do it though, but it's something that I'm thinking about. Another thing I'm thinking, oh, I think I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna play rook e7 and double up on the file. So after this queen move, I play rook e7. He's more than likely gonna move the bishop because it looks like he just wants to trade. Then I'm gonna double up on the rook. And if he decides to trade rook, I take with the queen, and then his back rank becomes a bit weak. Now there's queen to f5 that I still need to be aware of, but pawn g6 and I should be fine. Uh, Here, yeah, I think it has to be rook e7 because if I try rook e5 and he goes here, after the trade, I'm not going to be doubling up on the e file. The e file is the only complete open file on the board. And if I'm able to get full control over the e file, then you could say it's a slight win for me. Still, I need to get my light squared bishop in the game. Even if I put it on a6, he plays b3, and I'm still pointing towards the pawn chain. And you never want to have your bishop pointing towards a pawn chain. Yo, the guy has a very simple plan. Trade all the pieces off the board. All right. And this is why I tell you guys that your endgame skills needs to be careful. The guy's 2000. He's playing against someone who is very stronger. What is going through his mind is if I could just get all the pieces off the board, it's not going to be easy for me to lose this game. And that's the strategy that he's using. All right. Here I'm wondering if I'm able to play f5 hits the queen. I don't really want to be pushing pawns on the side that my king is on, but after f5 hits the queen, rook to e8, and then I successfully managed to double up on the file. And maybe I could even eventually triple up on the file, but maybe he's just going to play king f1 and just try to trade the pieces off the board. There's takes, double up on the rook, takes, king over. And then he just tries to trade everything, which means I'm going to have to try to win this endgame. Shouldn't be hard though. I don't really want to play. Oh, wait. Do I just play bishop back? Nah, can't play bishop back just yet. All right, let's just do that. Let's just take, since he wants an endgame, I'm going to give him an endgame. Now we double up on the file. We're now in the endgame, guys. One thing that I notice about my position is my pawns are on dark squares, while his pawns could be fixed on light squares. So that could be a positive for me. And his plan from here is simple. He's going to try to take the rook, swing the other rook over in the game, and then try to trade even more pieces. I'm thinking about playing pawn c6. I'm not sure if it works. Like pawn c6, takes. Yeah, let's do that. Because at the end of the day, my pawns are still on dark squares. And he needs to be careful here. Like, if he takes, then his g2 pawn could be under attack. And after the trade and then rook e1, he could be losing material with bishop takes g2. This is also an equal game, guys. So if both players play at equal level, then the game is just going to end in a draw. And it's not really hard for strong players with white to try to play for a draw. And that's what this guy's doing. But the end game is what really separates players. So let's see who's going to have the better end game technique here. And remember to like the video if you haven't liked the video as yet, guys. All right, so he pulls the bishop back. Let's just take on d5 first. If he takes with the pawn, he loses the game. So he has to take with the bishop. And the question is, who will be able to win this king and pawn endgame? because it's gonna go into a king and pawn endgame. Takes, takes, takes. His king is gonna run to. The thing is, his pawn on d5 is overexerted, so that's what I'm gonna use to try to win this game. So f5. Maybe I should trade everything first. Takes, takes, takes. King takes, and then I play d5. The king comes here, I go here. The king comes here, I go here. The king comes here, and the pawn is safe. Hmm. Okay, that's the move. Rook to e5. Still trying to attack weak pawns. This is what I tell you guys. In the end game, attack weak pawns. Now his position is kind of in Zugzwang. Like, not really, but kind of. Because if he ever takes a knight takes, his rook is doing a defensive role. So now I just need to find the best way to get around this. Maybe I could even play rook to c8 here. Because after takes takes, he has a pass pawn, but that could in fact be a weakness in his position. Okay, go here. If he takes, I take. If he pushes, my king is just too fast. Now I'm also trying to get access to his second rank as well. Okay, we need to get the king in the game, guys. Like, the player who is able to get their king in the game first is going to have a huge advantage. And the fact that he has this overexerted pawn could be a very nice plan for me to win. So he's obviously trading, was expecting the trades. He's getting his king in the game. I'm going to do the same, and I have a very simple plan here. Oh no, did I just miss a win? Maybe not. Check, block, takes, takes, king over, king up, king up, king up, king up. Maybe. It's still fine because I'm still threatening this. My plan is to get the king here, get the rook here, take the free pawn. Very, very simple. Right, so he pushes the pawn to d6. He's rolling the pawn up the board. That's what you do when you have passed pawns. If I check king move takes, he's just gonna queen. So oh my god, I almost blundered my rook. Seriously. If he push, I want to be able to go here. So I think I'm just gonna play f6. And then I play king up, king up. Plan is just to win this pawn. Bro, why would you play rook f1? What type of move was rook f1? I think he wants to play f4, but that was such a bad move, bro. You see, I tell you guys, if you want to, like, think about it. You're not going to be so stronger than your opponent where you just beat them off the board. If the game is hard and you're playing strong people, it will go to the end game. So please and get better at the end game. Anyways, check king move take, that's just a pawn. And this pawn is good as dead because king over is not hard. Check, king up, take the pawn, king up. Okay, maybe I need to king up, push. Let's play king up first. Let's not rush. I want to be able to easily get to this pawn. Once I get to this pawn, it's going to be over. Ah, you see what he just did? He decided to go back with his rook. But now we finally catch the pawn. Now we play king up. If he pushes the pawn, we go rook over. Our next move is to play rook over. We're going to take the pawn. He's not allowed to trade the rooks off the board. And okay, the position is not completely winning, but we did manage to win a free pawn. Okay, now he checks. Let's block the check. Rook takes would be very bad, so he goes here. And now I just need to protect my pawn. So let's just go g6. If he plays rook h5, then I play here. If he plays rook g7 and I push, he's probably able to go here. So rook to g7, I play king to f5, protecting the pawn. Still have to be very careful. Oh, that was nice. That was nice. Because if I take, he take with check and I go back, that's weird. So maybe I have to go here. Push takes. Wait, what? If I go here, he push. Then I takes. Yeah, let's do this. It's very weird. Position could still be kind of drawn, so I have to be careful. So now we check. Notice what he's doing, guys. If you're trying to play for a draw, the whole goal is to try to trade as many pawns as possible. So I'm going to take. After he plays king takes, I don't take because he wants to draw. I go here. You see what I just did? I don't take the pawn. I protect my pawn, but I attacked his rook, and then I take the pawn. And just like that, I'm now ahead by 2 pawns. It's still a very hard game to play because my king is kind of cut off. All right, I'm going to push this to try to keep his king cut off as well. We both have a minute on the clock, so I have to be fast. He pull his rook back. We must attack pawns in the end game. Let's hit the pawn. And if he checks, it's just lost. Like, checking is like the worst thing to do. Okay, he protects the pawn. Check. Force the king to move. Oh my god, I almost got checkmated. If I takes, I'm mated. All right, this is very tricky. Oh, fudge. No, that was bad. What am I doing? Oh, that's a check. Thank God it's a check. All right, my time is now running out, guys. We have to be very fast. Once he allows my king to escape, then I should be fine. All right, now he's going to be getting very annoying, but the plan is simple here. I don't care about this pawn. His king is already cut off. Let's push the pawn so that way the rook guards it. And now I'm just trying to run to this pawn. But my time is running out, so I have to be very, very fast. Very fast. Okay, rolling this pawn up the board is the plan. Attacking this pawn is the plan. Let's roll the pawn. Push. Guy's being very fast. Good job. Pass pawns must be pushed. It's over, guys. Now it's over. 18 seconds should be enough time to win this. Once I push takes, his king is just too far. That's the issue. His king is just too far away. That's why I tell you guys. Okay, that's another pawn, bro. Get better at the end game. Because you notice it wasn't hard for this guy to just literally trade all the pieces off the board. But what he couldn't do is hold on to the end game. Now this is just over. Okay, that's now just a queen. And just like that, he is checkmated. Please like the video. Good game.